Hello. Hey, we got two people here. RT96 and West Side Girl Reacts. Good to have you. Tonight we're going to do something a little different. We have Made by Jim Bob, who is a whack job I covered when I had my other channel. He probably took a semester of logic and philosophy, and that's as far as he got. He's a right-wing piece of shit. Um, as you can see by his intro. He's also a flat earther, a religious nutbag. Hey, Martin.
Welcome to the show. Today's called Space Talk. I'm jumping on a channel called Red Rhetoric. Should be interesting.
So he's going to, I guess, debate Red's rhetoric. And he's going to talk about a whole bunch of other stuff, too.
We're going to talk about space stuff. He's a space nerd. I'm a space turd. Should be interesting. We already got some space spurgs. The amateur. Is that an argument against God? What's an argument against God? What are you talking about? No, it's called an internal critique, amateur. You made a statement that it's best to believe true things and false things. We're asking you, first of all, why is that the case? Second of all, I was giving an example of where that might not be true. That's why I asked you. By the way, if you take an evolutionary perspective, you've already contradicted yourself. So when he says it's best to believe the most...
Yeah, he doesn't believe evolution is true.
True things and the few false things. Well, no. According to your own creation myth, there was a moment in time where evolution, the evolution that you believe in that took place, would have produced false beliefs for a reason. For instance, to develop fear, to develop a sense of fear, paranoia itself is a false belief. You know, unreasoned paranoia. So if you're protecting yourself by believing you're in danger, and you develop a sense of protection and awareness from a belief that you're in danger when you're actually not in danger, that's an example of believing a true thing. Now, the irony is probably from your worldview, amateur conversationalist, which is an appropriate name, you don't even choose your beliefs. From your view, we probably don't choose our beliefs. So saying it's best to do X or Y, well, there's no best. There is, from your view, only a mechanical system that produces exactly what physics allows it to. But you're not at that level of conversation based on your questions alone. Is this a debate? No, it's not.
And he used to be an Owen Benjamin cultist, but I guess he's changed that. So
actually, hopefully, it's going to be pretty chill.
He said something negative about Owen Benjamin, so kind of makes me wonder what happened there.
Guy mostly does debunk videos. He probably engages a lot with like flat Earth stuff. I'm gonna sit back and basically ask very basic questions. That's my approach. I want to ask very basic questions. I don't know you so well. I can tell by your level of argumentation that you haven't thought about these things before, and you're jumping on a channel I haven't seen you before, where you're just going to get eaten alive philosophically.
And I invited him to the chat to watch me rip him apart or review him. So,
Captive Desk says paranoia is something you should talk about since that is your worldview. Again, no arguments. I'm not paranoid. What am I paranoid about? Nope. Well, I already demonstrated, amateur conversationalist, you don't even have a reason, a philosophical or metaethical reason to say we should believe true things. You know why? Because if we ask you why should we believe true things over false things, you're going to come to some sort of usefulness, utility, or pragmatism. There's no other way around it. You can't tell me it's a virtue from your view. So what are you going to say? What are you going to say? What is it? Is it a virtue? Why ought we do it? So he's going to give me the link at 12:30, a half hour. I figure we can look at other things. Hopefully the tech works. I'm going to be jumping on his stream with my audio, but presenting his stream on my stream. So hopefully we don't get an echo. And if we do get some kind of echo, you guys will let me know if it's unbearable, okay?
well, he does think that that if he does bad, evil things, that he won't go to heaven. He thinks there's a devil. So that's a paranoia all in itself, an irrational fear of something that doesn't exist, right? Yeah, Owen wasn't extreme enough. Yeah, probably.
You Captive Desk, did you learn what the first step of the scientific method is? Yeah, I'm still waiting for Captive Desk to tell me the scientific method and the difference between an observation and a hypothesis. He still hasn't done it. He hasn't done it. What advantage did you gain in believing an untrue thing like Noah's Ark? Fulfills me with joy to know that miracles exist.
Miracles don't exist. And from what I understand, Noah's Ark, the thing they found at Mount Ararat was just a rock structure.
Captive, is that how are you going to debate that answer? That I'm fulfilled with joy. That's what I gained from believing in Noah's Ark. It fills me with joy. How are you going to counter that, dude?
You can't counter a deluded mind, really. Hey, Doug.
It's just too easy.
Oh, is there? Awesome, Doug.
Destin seems... Destin? Who's Destin? Destiny? Dustin? This guy? Dustin? That's
No, his name is Destin.
the guy on the screen, right? Dustin?
No, Destin.
Red is so... I've never heard Red, so who knows? Try video games? I mean, what's the difference? If it gives me... What's the difference? If you're saying try video games are false? So you're telling me to go practice a false belief called a video game? Is a video game a false belief? I mean, what is it?
No, video game isn't a false belief. If you think a video game's a false belief, then you're deluded. Hey, Eeyore. Into thinking that video games are real.
What advantage does joy in nonsense provide? What do you mean? Joy is an experience. So joy itself, people seek joy. Doing something that gives you joy, that is what it's providing. What are you talking about? The advantage is being a joyful person. If you're a joyful person, maybe you're a better father, maybe you're a better friend, maybe you like your day better. People like you better. I'm going to ask you the same thing. What's your advantage of not believing in God? There's no real advantage. What? You end up not having any moral objective standards? You have no teleological standards?
What? You have no moral standards? What the fuck are you talking about? What in the hell are you talking about, man? If you need a book, a 2,000-year-old book to give you morals, you aren't. You aren't truly a moral person if you need a book to tell you how to be moral.
Standards. You have to believe that you're a result of an unguided random process that you can't account for. Is that better? No, it's not better. Notice how the difference between me and you, Captive Desk, is that I don't spend my time in atheist live stream chats, and you spend your time every day in a theist live chat. So obviously we provide more to you than you provide us. Speaking of...
Yeah, we tune into you guys because you're fucking idiots, and it's hilarious to watch you spew bullshit.
Joy, I just watched Adam Sandler's special. It's by far the best stand-up special, if you call it that. It's really a synthesis of things. It was so good. I was actually surprised because, you develop a relationship, an association to Adam Sandler where he just talks like basically an autistic person in every video, right? Every movie is like, oh, who would he do? Why'd you do that? But this was more than that. So I do recommend it. I'm not going to go over any
Oh, he also thinks he's funny.
of it. Wait for you guys to do it.
Just letting you know, that was humor. He is. If he acts oddly, it's because he's trying to be funny.
Yourself, but it's definitely worth watching. Like Stanley, $10. The federal budget for 2024 is about $5.6 trillion. That's about $15 billion a day. For what? $15 billion a day. So for the government to spend $500 million on something is nothing to them. That's why money is not a great argument. So for my side of things, who's skeptical, maybe it's not the best position to say, well, they, if we're talking about NASA, well, they get this much a day. It's like, well, that can't really be an object when it comes down to it. So, space talk. Suburban says them discovering Noah's Ark in the Turkish mountains is preposterous, but dinosaur bones are dinosaur bones are hilarious. It brings you joy to deny there's a skydive.
So he doesn't believe in dinosaurs.
Yeah, so we have equal ground then from your view. So you have no reason to argue against it. If the only purpose for a belief is to bring you joy, what did I say? You have no purpose. From your view, there's no purpose. That's why secularism is so stupid, because everything they're saying, it's inconsistent to be a secularist and an anti-theist if everything fundamentally comes down to preferences and feelings. All you have to say from a Christian view is that you have good feelings when you're Christian and you have bad feelings when you don't. They can't say anything. That's why it's such a joke. There's hours of Jim Bob by commenting in live chat. Yeah, because if they're talking about me, I'm going to comment. So the difference is they're talking about me. So another fail from you, amateur conversationalist. Now you can...
Oh, so it's okay to go on atheist live streams, right? If it's you. But everybody else, why are you doing that? Hey, Real Cygnus. What a clown.
You can jump on if you want. I would love to destroy your philosophy. Acrylic 5 gifted memberships. Thanks so much. Appreciate that. Equal ground. You aren't even smart enough to know where you're being mocked. I don't care if you're mocking me. Mocking people isn't an argument. Okay. If you were to call in and give us your philosophy, it would just crumble. It would literally crumble with a couple.
Give me your philosophy. Why? Why?
Questions. Who cares if you're mocked? I don't care if I'm mocked. I mock people. People mock me. That's a nothing statement. We're on the internet. Mockery is rampant. What's your point? You don't have a point. You have no purpose of being here. Captive Desk, you just said you have good feeling, joy. That's all. No, it's called an internal critique. Captive Desk, how are you this retarded still? It's not a contradiction from my view. I'm appealing to the view I'm internally critiquing, you dummy. You should have to earn the right to speak over here, Captive Desk. You're so it's just mind-numbing how stupid you are. You're just so dumb that I can't, it's hard to even justify being angry or emotional about it because you're just so stupid. If you take off your hat, we could see your point. Wow.
Ah, that's a sick burn.
Oh, sick burn, bro.
Yes, it is. Hey, Ice Cube. We are watching a dipshit named Made by Jim Bob. His channel is Made by Jim Bob. And he's going to be talking with Reg Rhetoric. This is August 28th is when this came out.
Anyway, let's watch Dustin talk about...
Man, I had this on low. His name's not Dustin, it's Destin. Destin.
Practicing training the moon landing on a limb, on a little tinfoil tent.
About it.
If you'd ever watched his fucking channel, well, first off, you might learn something, and number two, you wouldn't get his fucking name wrong.
So if you're a contractor, a program manager, if you're NASA, and you have things you want to talk about landing on the moon.
Do you guys remember when I reviewed this guy finally going to his dad's work, who works at NASA?
So you reviewed him before, but you didn't know his name? Wow, what a jackass.
NASA, after a career in car salesman ship, his job was to measure things. Remember that stream for my dedicated followers? Or his dad has the southern accent. He's like, I'm measuring stuff. Sounds like Captive Desk. And Dustin here, his little pep, he has a little...
Man, that's the worst country accent I've ever seen in my life.
More background in engineering and physics than his dad. Starts asking him questions about his little project at NASA, measuring stuff. He's like, Dad, why is the foil facing the wrong way? Shouldn't it be facing up toward the sun or whatever? And he's like, I don't know. I just measure it. He's asking him physics questions, placement questions, the operations, what does it do? Dad's like, I don't know. I just measure things. He's like, shut up, son. Son, stop it. Stop it, son. Cut it out, son.
Moon, I'm your guy. Just give me a call. We'll do a video about it here on Smarter Every Day. So that being said, let's think about this. I want to talk about the specific...
Yes, he is a pseudo-intellectual who thinks he's not pseudo.
Technical issues that have to be overcome in order for this to happen safely. So
he's also a fucking bigot.
Number one, if you think about a lander descending to the surface of another celestial body, you basically have to solve the equation of velocity equals 0 when you touch the surface of the moon or whatever, right? So that's been done before, right? When the Apollo astronauts descended to the surface
there it is. See it descending?
Of the moon, they actually...
Check it out. Check it out, guys. Check out the landing. You guys seeing this? Mind-blowing.
Piloted the
Check it out. Look at it.
All the way down, and they made sure their velocity equals to 0 right at the moment that they touched down on the surface.
See what I mean?
Contact light. So how did they do that? It seems like a simple question, but it's very, very complicated. The reason this is so complicated is here on Earth.
It's not complicated. All you need is 3 women of color and some chick to handwrite all the code in a stack of books.
See what I mean?
It's actually not that complicated.
We are being pulled down towards the Earth at 9.8 meters per second square, 1G, right? Well, on the moon, it's 1/6 G, 1.625 meters per second square. So think about that. If you have a spacecraft and you have a rocket on it, it's going to behave differently on the moon than it does here on Earth. So how do you...
See, he's jealous because he couldn't do what 3 black women could do with a slide rule.
Practice landing on the moon when you're on Earth. Many scientists and engineers among us right now, they have the knowledge.
And it's funny, all the flat earthers are like, well, 3 black women and calculators did all the math. No, 3 black women and slide rules did the math.
Of how we went to the moon. But what we need to reclaim is the understanding.
They have the knowledge, but we also forgot it and destroyed the technology, according to
hey, Brenda.
the director of NASA. It's bizarre. We have the knowledge, but now we have to explain it to you guys, and it's really hard to explain, but I'm going to give it a shot.
Understanding of why we made the decisions we made along the way. And that is a task well
Yeah, he'll take whatever position he has to take to make you wrong about him. Oh, I'm not a flat earther. Yeah, but you're pro flat earth. Yes, but what's pro?
suited for the scientific historians among us. Let's start this whole series with one of the most authoritative sources on the history of the lunar lander program that I can imagine. It was a lecture given in
Imagine is the key word.
2007 in front of the Society of Experimental Test Pilots by none other than Neil Armstrong. Let's go get smarter every day.
Yes, because what you believe is imaginary. See, you believe in the imaginary. Destin here believes in the concrete and the scientific. That bothers you, doesn't it?
In January of 1962, FRC proposed a free flight lunar landing simulator program.
The free flight thing, actually, I'll just take a look at what he's talking about here real quick.
Armstrong and Aldrin try to master the lunar module, knowing that it can be only so realistic on Earth.
They were pilots that were trained to fly in Earth's atmosphere. Those skills are completely useless on the moon because there's no atmosphere.
I think, now, I could be wrong here, but based on what I've investigated as far as what the lunar landing is using for propellant and what this thing is, this thing has a jet facing down on it, right? It just has a jet facing down. Now, this is interesting because this is totally useless for training, and yet they tell you it's useful. Totally useless. Just like being underwater is useless.
Why? Why is it useless? Why is it useless when it simulates the lower gravity of the moon?
It gives you the visual aesthetic of space, weightlessness. It doesn't give you the physics at all. It gives you the opposite. It would endanger people more than not.
How? What the fuck is this guy talking about?
This is similar where, this thing is a machine that has a rocket facing downward toward the ground, right? And they're saying, well, this is the closest thing we got. Well, no. The rocket that you're using is using pressure against mass, air. That's what...
No, it's not, dipshit. That's not how a rocket works. See, he doesn't know how rockets work. And he claims to be a fucking genius.
What it's using primarily. And to my knowledge, the kind of...
So he's one of those people that thinks, hey, God is nowhere. He's one of these idiots who thinks that in order for a rocket to work, the air has to be thick enough to support the weight of the rocket and the thrust that it's putting out.
Fuel that you're using and the nozzles you're using for the lunar is not the same as this. It's not a single engine thruster that's pushing down against thick mass we call air in our atmosphere.
So he does think that the air has to be thick. Wow, what an idiot. He has no concept of laws of motion. Nothing, man. He just up there, it's this fucking empty dome filled with God.
They needed something called the Lunar Landing Training Vehicle, which was a special machine designed to replicate flying in the moon's 1/6 gravity.
How do you replicate it, something you've never accessed before?
We know what the gravity of the moon is based on its size. And, yeah.
Like, to my knowledge, replicating something is having...
See, it's called physics. It's called physics, dipshit.
Access to it and then replicating the conditions. So they're doing it in reverse.
Gravity, even though you were still on Earth.
Astronauts call it the flying bedstead. In the center, a big jet engine.
So you can't replicate a combat scenario that you've never been in? Really? You can't simulate a battle that hasn't happened yet? Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. Can you simulate football plays that haven't been run yet? Yeah, you can. What do you think NFL, like Madden NFL is?
Engine that points straight down.
So they literally took a jet engine, pointed it straight down, and put someone in a light...
Yeah, he has 18,000 subscribers.
Basically aluminum and steel system that you sit in a chair, right? And they just like send him up, right? What do you mean visual? You have to use real full sentences here or you're going to get banned, okay? We don't have any patience for, things we can't respond to. We don't know what you mean when you say visual question mark.
Let's see. You mentioned the word visual, like visual cues. You've only mentioned the word visual once. So he's referring to when you said the word visual. Wow, you're not real smart, are you?
We don't know what you mean by that. We didn't destroy the 1960s technology. Oh, really? We didn't destroy the technology? Well, you're going to have to take that up with Don Pettit, Captive Desk.
With a pilot seat bolted on top.
Yeah, even if they did destroy the technology, it's useless now. The technology they destroyed is the electronics, not rockets, not our ability to build fucking rockets. Jesus Christ. Oh, they deleted the telemetry. Okay. So, why do we need telemetry? We already studied the telemetry and understand it and have adjusted things based on it. Why do we need the telemetry? It's like if someone leaves you a text message saying be here at a certain amount of time and here's the directions, and you go there and you go to the party, you leave, do you keep the text message? If you delete the text message, does it delete your ability to find the house again? What a dumb fuck.
Each flight is a precarious venture.
There was no safety net. If you tilted too far, you could just fall out of the sky.
Yeah. If you tilt it too far, you'll fall out of the sky. Why? Because there's a single jet facing down. So, you're going to be
No, because there's gravity.
precariously trying to tilt and maneuver one direction where there's only one vector down against the machine, against the air. So I'm just wondering, how is this in any way, shape, or form identical or similar to Moon? Now, because Captive Desk said such a stupid thing, now I have to find Don Pettit. Okay.
Read between the lines. Take a listen.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology.
Oh, sorry. L's in the chat for Captive Desk, please. L's in the chat. Let the L's come down. Right angle. Perfect right angle L's. Captive Desk says, we didn't destroy the 60s technology. We have better technology now that can't get you to the moon. Dude.
What do you mean it can't get you to the moon? What the fuck are you talking about, man?
Your daddy right here. Listen to what he's saying, bro. Shut up.
Well, if we don't have it right now, China has it, Japan has it, Russia has it. So who else went to the moon? Israel? Didn't Israel go? So if we don't have it, we'll just get it from them. Right? Right? What a dipshit.
Do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed.
It's like, oh, Ford can't make cars because they destroyed all the molds for the Model A.
That technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again. But
okay, so take the L, Captive Desk. Stop talking. Think more.
Okay.
You just got destroyed. I didn't need to say anything, okay? Don Pettit said it for you. And no, it doesn't make sense. If the technology they, quote, destroyed from 1969 and onward, and it's too painful to build back up, it's interesting that the modern technology still can't send a man to the moon. There's no one.
Yeah, it can. Yes, it can. What are you fucking talking about?
No men on the moon right now still. No men on.
Why would there be men on the moon, dude? Why? What purpose is there on the moon? Because flat earthers think they should be there every fucking day?
On the moon. So, keep your trap shut.
Armstrong and Alton beat only so
in Earth's atmosphere. Those skills are completely useless.
The Indian one's the
No
best.
atmosphere.
It's the best one.
If they went, why haven't they gone back? Well, you asking me why haven't they gone back means that you are conceding that they went.
They needed something called the Lunar Landing Training Vehicle,
Yes, India, they went. Did I say India?
which was a special machine designed to replicate flying in the moon's 1/6 gravity, even though you were still on Earth.
That's what they say, 1/6 gravity. We're not talking about just gravity. You notice how they only said gravity, right? So 1/6 gravity, you're
Yeah.
messing with a different fundamental effect, right? You're messing with a different effect. But that doesn't, we're not talking about gravity. We're talking about the mass available to push against. We're talking
It doesn't push against the mass, dipshit. It's Newton's, third law? Every action has an opposite and equal reaction. When you put out thrust this way, the thing that's putting the thrust out is going to go that way. You fucking ignorant asshole. You fucking troglodyte.
About something else. Gravity would the effect of a downward acceleration of an object, given there's no.
Yeah, why is nobody in the Marinara Trench anymore? I call it Marinara Trench.
No thrust, nothing happening. Sure, but that's not wholly what we're dealing with. So when they sell it like, oh, we're dealing with 1/6 gravity, well, no, you're not just dealing with that. Aren't you dealing with something else?
No, dumb fuck. And in space, it's easier to fly a rocket because you don't have that air resistance.
Aren't we dealing with something else? What do I think he means when he says destroyed?
Now, you would have to take the lack of oxygen or the lack of atmosphere into account by how fast you go in, because you don't have the atmosphere to slow your ass down. And moving through it, yeah, you'd have to compensate for that, but that's no biggie.
I mean, I think he means destroyed. I think it means that, from that view, you don't have access to it. Now, you could take a more of a meta approach to this and say, well, maybe what he means is that it's hidden, that nobody can know about it. That's more reasonable to me than destroy, if he meant destroy to mean destroy. Now, if we just take him at his words, destroy means destroy. You destroyed it. You got rid of it. You don't have it anymore. To me, it's more reasonable that that's a cover, and that let's grant that everything they did is real. Let's just grant it all. It's more reasonable to me to think that you hide that kind of technology. You don't let everybody have that technology. That's more reasonable to me. You don't let everybody have the tech. To me, that's smarter. Like if I was a part of a nation that had that tech and I bragged about it and nobody else could do it, I certainly would say it's gone, right? So at least, but that still means that NASA is hiding things, and maybe there's a necessary reason. Fine, I'm open to that. I'm open to that. Ultra Void 5. Oh my clown music's still on. Ultra Void $5. Is the tech really destroyed? That's kind of what we're asking. Last time I checked, the stuff comes from previous stuff, so we just need to find new stuff and make it into stuff. Ultra Void. The Breakfast Taco's argument just lasts forever, doesn't it? Why send men to the moon? We already did. Okay, watch as Captive Desk.
Dude, we already multiple times we collected the data that we needed to, so we didn't have to go back. Plus, it relies on funding from the government. I mean, a lot of assholes in the government.
Desk takes another L. Coincidentally,
hey, Mr. B.
From the same guy, Don Pettit. Why the moon? Man, I feel bad for Captive. He's so stupid. I mean, you're so utterly dumb.
Really? You think rockets push off air, dipshit? Careful with aspersions, casting aspersions.
Well, let's listen to Don Pettit.
Man, to be a spacefaring species, he would have given us a moon.
Captive Desk. Don Pettit himself, one of the directors, one of the long-sitting directors of NASA, is doing a TED Talk specifically why we should send the men to the moon, why we should go to the moon, why we should build on the moon. You're asking Don Pettit.
Yeah.
Not more right angles in the chat for Captive Desk. I don't know how many times you can lose in one day. Mud $5. Fake movies and TV have caused a huge misunderstanding of how hard it is to build literally anything that functions properly in an unknown environment. That's true. I mean, if you just watch movies and you go, oh, that's awesome. Look at that thing.
Moon.
Wait, what was that? I didn't read that.
TV have caused a huge misunderstanding of how hard it is to build literally anything that functions properly in an unknown environment. That's true. I mean, if you just watch movies and you go, oh, that's awesome. Look at that thing.
Moon. This quote is by Kraft Ericke in 19.
I mean, he's not the dumbest person I've ever come across. He does have good points in certain things, but just fundamentally, he's just an idiot. A brainwashed idiot.
1984, and I like the way he stirs the words around.
I
from an earlier quote,
like the way he stirs the words around.
something about flying. And I like to use it to set the mood for why the moon.
So, Captive Desk, you asked a question to me, and the irony is I go to your Space Daddy for the answer. I go to your Space Daddy for the answer, buddy.
Space Daddy? There's no Space Daddy.
Take the L.
Moon, it's close. It's only 250,000 miles away, but it's close in space vernacular. It's 3 days away.
I mean, the reason we go back to the moon would be as a launching point for further into space, like Mars. It's the only reason we go back. Maybe or to set up mining a mining installation. There may be minerals, under the moon that we don't know about.
Using proven propulsion for human transport.
Proven. It's weird that I use the word proven right there.
Hydrogen.
Hell, according to NASA, there's a planet out there that's completely made of diamond.
And oxygen. And this allows for resupply. And there's multiple launch windows.
He probably is a libertarian, yeah.
Every month. So
I know he's far right. What did there's a comedian, I can't remember his name, he said, the Libertarian Party is my favorite political party because they don't stand for anything.
you can have a trickle of parts and supplies going to whatever your installation is on the moon.
So it gets into it, but I mean, just obvious reasons why the moon, if you could do what they said we could do in 1969, having little stations on the moon.
We could do more than we did in 1969, buddy.
Given that it's only 3 days away and with the current technology, which according to Captive Desk only got better, can transport much lighter, much more durable, much more advanced materials and systems onto the moon. Not only that, but it gives you a vantage point to look at the rest of the system from a different view than Earth. That's huge. That's a huge thing. That's a huge advantage. Not only that, with the assumption of interval landing and departure locations, the moon would be the obvious. Another departure location. If you're going to create a system of transportation between objects in space, you would go to the moon. According to Don Pettit, even according to my own reasoning. That's why, given the feats that are said to...
But you don't think we can get there. That's the problem.
...have happened in 1969 up to 74, 75, whatever it was. I just follow the trends of technology. And why this particular...
Reagan's kitten joke. I think I've heard that.
...feature industry has not kept up with the trends of the rest of technological advancements.
And we all know that when you go into space, you have all this equipment that keeps you alive.
What? It hasn't kept up with the rest of technological advantage? Space tourism is a thing, man. We sent probes to Mars. Multiple probes to Mars. What are you talking about?
And all of that equipment is serial number 0.
I'm going to keep this playing. I'm going to call in to the guy and then try to set up our technology, okay?
001. And every once in a while, the engineers might design something that breaks. And so it's good to have spare parts. We're learning this on the International Space Station. After 18 years, it's a well-honed machine, but we're still learning it. When we go to another planetary surface, if it's close like the moon, we can get spare parts. The moon, it's interesting. It's a planetary-sized body. It has the surface area nearly equal to the combined continents of North and South America. Lots of places to live. Early Earth history has been obliterated on Earth due to geologic processes. However, the moon, being in the same vicinity as the Earth, has preserved the early history of Earth in the solar system and its climate. So we can go to the moon to learn about Earth. And then the moon is a natural laboratory. It has a stable surface. It has no atmosphere. It has fractional gravity. Fractional gravity to do scientific.
What the hell happened there? What?
Atmosphere.
Okay. Okay, it wasn't me. Holy crap. Thought that was me for a second. It's better.
It has fractional gravity. Fractional gravity to do scientific.
Yeah, it's not me.
All right, my audience, can you hear me? I'm pulling up the Google Meet where we're going to have a discussion. And Red, should I call you Red or? Okay, cool. Did you guys just hear? Did my audience hear his voice just now? Yes or no?
Nope.
Yes. Oh, can't hear him. Okay, hold on a second then. Keep talking for me. Red.
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
How about now, you guys? Keep going. Red. Sorry.
Testing.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Testing. Yes. Okay. Okay, they hear you now. Bing, bing, bong. Good. Okay, great. Cool. Well, I was just looking at some things here. Did you want any questions of me before we kind of get into different topics or whatever? And just kind of get a sense, just like a layout of framework for the discussion.
Yep. We'll get started in 2 minutes. Let me set some stuff
sure.
on my end.
Yeah, cool, no problem. Turn him up a nudge. Yeah, okay.
It'd work.
Fix my mic. What's my mic sound like to you in the chat? Do you say fix it? Turn up your hearing aids. I think my mic should
Turn up your bell tones.
be good on my side. So it looks like it's not peaking, but it's close. So make sure that's good. You're fine. Okay, great. Alrighty. Well, he's going to start streaming on his end. This is not a StreamYard share, so it's not going to combine our audiences.
By the way, I sent off for the printer. It should be here Tuesday. So, cool.
But should be interesting.
I've already printed an accessory for it. There's a when you take the build plate off and you pull it off, there's always like resin that's still clinging to it. So you want to tilt it on its side to let the resin drain off. And I printed a bracket that goes onto the Z-axis thing, the thing that the build plate snaps onto, and then it has it has basically a female thing that goes onto the machine, and then a male part that the build plate snaps onto, so it sits at an angle. It's pretty cool.
Not sure where.
So when I print, when it's done, take the build plate off, put that thing on, put the build plate on it, and then just leave it for 10 minutes and drip, 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 drip.
It's going to go. Again, I'm not going to take a very hard stance. I want to basically just have a conversation and ask people questions.
Engineered that way for a reason. Engineers don't like a clean work area.
All right, so it should be good to go on my end. So
alrighty.
Let me just get started here. The way
I think you can even buy build plates that have an extra thing, that have the extra lug on the side, so you can take it off and put it back on and it'll drain.
I'll do this is I'll do a brief introduction and then we'll go from there. Okay.
Cool.
All right. Hang tight.
Hey, no problem.
Okay. According to the doohickeys.
But yeah, anybody who's used it, anybody who's done that, it says it's great. It works like a charm.
It says that we are live on my end. All right. Let me get a test from you now.
Check 1 2 1 2.
Looks like we have audio. That is good. Audience, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but you appear to be getting audio from both of us, which is either the most amazing thing ever or the most horrible thing you could possibly imagine in your entire existence. So with that, I'm going to say hello, everyone. I appreciate all of you for being here today. So there's going to be 2 different live streams going on, one on my side and one on the other side. So let me just introduce myself, and then I would ask.
I want to get a silicone mat, big silicone mat for it to sit on. Those are kind of nice because when they get dirty, they get resin on them. You just take them out in the sun and then just peel the resin off.
That you do the same.
Sure.
My name is Red from the YouTube channel Red's Rhetoric. I do a whole bunch of different things, so like record rocket launches and talk about flat Earth for some reason. And
I mean, Red's Rhetoric used to be the top dog in debating flat earthers.
I decided to have this conversation talk about our time in space and the feasibility of satellites. I think it will be a great conversation. For my audience, could you introduce yourself, tell people who you are, what you do, that kind of thing?
Sure. My name's Jim Bob. My channel is made by Jim Bob, and I have an Instagram account as well. I'm primarily a cartoonist. I do satirical cartoons and stuff with culture and politics, but I get into theology. I get into different topics.
Actually, he does bigoted cartoons. They're not really political. They're more bigoted, like 5th grade humor cartoons.
And one of those topics is space and the concept of space, the history of the concept of space travel. I'm interested in some of that. And I just kind of explore this stuff and I try to do it in a humorous way. Sometimes it's combative, but ultimately I'm just interested in the variety of topics. This is just one of those topics.
Excellent. All right. So let me go ahead and break the ice. And thank you very much for agreeing to this discussion. So to break the ice, I was informed by some individuals on Twitter that you are skeptical as to our success in space, primarily in regards to like satellites, orbital satellites and stuff. Is that a fair assessment of your position?
Yeah, it's like kind of like inquiring about what the claims are, what the purpose of them are, what the extent of their capabilities are. It's pretty much an open-ended inquiry where I start from skepticism.
Okay, so I guess I'll start with the obvious question. Do you believe that satellites even exist?
Yeah, to what extent, I'm not clear on. I know that the early programs and still programs today do use balloons, and that comes up a lot. Now, that's not a defeater to orbital
No, satellites don't use balloons. Those are called weather stations.
Satellites, just because that exists. But it is interesting that aspect exists, that format of a satellite exists, and it makes sense to me to create some sort of system of a connected network of information and data through ballooning.
How do you make a balloon stay perfectly still? How do you guide a balloon? How do you steer a balloon when there's no propulsion system on board that balloon?
And not only that ballooning would allow for maintenance because you can habitually land these things with precision safely. Whereas the alternative, where there's 11,000 some, correct me if I'm wrong, 11,800 satellites from various sources in perpetual orbit,
that don't need maintenance. They don't need maintenance.
I didn't verify that, so I'm not going to deny it or affirm it.
If it's built right and it's in an oxygen-free environment, it's going to work. It doesn't need maintenance.
There's no way for me at this point.
Yes, zero stem.
Point in my inquiry to affirm it. I just kind of look at it like, okay, well, what can I observe all of them? Can I examine all of them? And I don't know the answer to that.
So basically, you are aware of what is typically referred to as satelloons.
Mm-hmm.
So satellites that hang from high altitude weather balloons, and you're familiar with those. But as far as the orbital variety of satellites, you are, I guess, unconvinced of their existence and or of their feasibility.
Yeah, like I would say their existence, or to what extent they do exist. Is it the number that's opposed? What is when someone says there's a satellite in space, are they specifically saying it's orbital, or are they including the thing that's also a satellite that's attached to a balloon? I don't know how to sift all of that out, but it comes into my mind when I question it. So yeah, to that extent. And then as feasibility, I think of the question of like a really basic question, like what is it that an orbital satellite does that's worth having that as a system that.
I see what you take the balloon and you pop the side of it, and like in a cartoon, it goes.
A lower form of a satellite that's just floating can't do, and further, what is a satellite doing? What is it capable of that can't be replicated or done better on the land itself?
Well, if you wanted to talk about like what they can do, that would be different from like, let's say, a satelloon. A satelloon would be very unpredictable in terms of the weather.
For instance, one thing that they can do in space that they can't do in our atmosphere is photograph X-rays coming from the sun. Can't be done. Our atmosphere filters X-rays. They can only be taken from space. So
it's always going to be at the mercy of the winds in that particular area that you happen to launch the thing, and you don't have that kind of predictability when it comes to an orbital satellite that would be unaffected by such things. So let's say you are using satellites for GPS. In order for GPS to work, the satellites would have to be in a certain configuration to make sure you have complete coverage all over the planet. Otherwise, if they were all bunched up in one place or another, you would have a stronger signal in one location as opposed to a different location, which would be a weak signal, and it would just be totally at the mercy of the wind. Whereas if you had GPS satellites that were actually in orbit, they would be spaced apart continuously, because that's how you literally made them orbit.
Okay.
It's kind of like clockwork on that front.
Okay, well then would you say, in addition to avoiding weather complication and inhibitions, would you say is there something specifically technologically that the satellite does that a lower altitude machine or a land machine couldn't replicate?
I'm sure there's a lot of things that can be replicated. I think the way that they...
Exactly, RT96. They can easily Google shit, right? But they're afraid to Google stuff. And they don't believe it anyway, so then they debate and look like idiots. Hey, Austin.
Or the reason why they would use satellites is to lower the amount of infrastructure that's needed. So, for example, if you are a certain altitude over the Earth, you can see a certain amount of that Earth. Whereas if you're in a satellite that is way further away from Earth, you can see a lot more of the surface area, and therefore your area of coverage would be increased, and you just lowered the amount of satellites that you would need to accomplish that same exact goal.
Okay, but what is it you're seeing in that example then? Like, what's the data you're seeing?
Well, it's basically a question of geometry at that point. So if I am looking at a sphere, so if I'm looking at a sphere and it's really close up, because satelloons would only go as high as your typical weather balloon. So what is that, about 20 kilometers or so, 30 kilometers, something like that? People in the live chat, if y'all can check out what's like the maximum altitude of a weather balloon, because that would be the maximum altitude of one of those balloon satellites as a consequence of that. So you would then have a total coverage surface area. Let's say it's, I'm just pulling a number out of my ass here. Let's say you can see 100 kilometers in all directions from that particular satellite. Well, if you go to geostationary
Yes, absolutely, Austin.
orbit, you just increased your surface area by thousands of kilometers. And that surface area
High school right-wing incels.
being covered by a single satellite as opposed to many smaller, more numerous satelloons, you just, increased your coverage and you lowered the amount of money that you'll be spending. And also the infrastructure just would be.
I saw it. It was a joke on, or it was a report from Saturday Night Live Weekend Update. It said a new study has come out talking about how fewer high school boys are losing their virginity. This can be totally attributed to a complete lack of skanks. Hey, Monkey Dodo, how you doing? I love that. I love the Weekend Update. It's the best it's been in a long time.
A lot easier in that case.
Okay, but wouldn't well, the question is,
would I debate Manor? I have no idea. I don't know who that is. Never heard of him.
okay, so if granted surface area, but surface area itself, I don't know the value of just surface area, if not the data that's assigned to the surface area. So I'm asking, what is it the satellite is doing that can't be done? Like you're saying that it's higher, therefore it has a greater vantage point, right? A wider resolution as opposed to a closer resolution for what it's looking at, right? For what its eyes and ears, so to speak, are taking in. But I'm asking, what is specifically the advantage of wider surface area itself? What's the data that it can gain that the lower versions can't piece together on their own?
It's a question of efficiency. You can do the exact same thing with, like, let's say undersea cables. You don't need Starlink to have the internet globally connected.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't do political debates, so I probably wouldn't.
You don't need satellites to predict the weather, for example. You don't need the International Space Station to do science. You just don't. But it's a question of efficiency. And wouldn't it be great for us, instead of linking a whole bunch of separate radar stations which do have gaps in between them, wouldn't it be great to fill out those gaps with a overarching view of the planet so that we can make better models for weather prediction? Like, for example, what we
I don't do politics or religion, so
get with the Himawari satellite, or with the Epic satellite with the Discover, the Discover satellite with the Epic camera. All of these are tools that we use because they are more efficient. And not only are they more efficient, given the fact that they have a wider view, there's less gaps in service.
So weather is your primary distinction between what a satellite gains in a wider view that lower things that are just interconnected through some sort of system can't see. Is that what you're saying? That weather is
not
the
just
thing?
weather, not just weather, just efficiency all over, because it's all about filling the gaps in between. So let's hypothetically say your undersea cables get damaged by earthquakes, for example, or they get damaged by some other natural disaster here on the ground. Satellites are impervious to that. They don't care about the weather events. They don't care about earthquakes. They don't care about any of that stuff. And also, given the fact that they don't care about that stuff, you have redundancy built into the system. And also, on top of that, given the fact that satellites require a lot less infrastructure to operate, you actually end up saving a lot of money in the long run.
Okay, so you're saying they're
cheaper. They're cheaper.
Okay, it's financial advantage in addition to you can look at weather from a larger vantage point.
It's a financial advantage, it's a infrastructure advantage, it's an efficiency advantage, and not just science, but also regular communication. That is correct.
What's regular communication?
So that would be like your internet connectivity, your voice connectivity, TV, radio. Sirius XM even has their own geostationary satellite.
Isn't it the case that over 90% of our communications is hardwired underground cables?
I would say the vast majority of our communication is hardwired.
So isn't that contradict that it's more efficient to do communication through satellite? If the majority, obviously, of our communication is hardwired, then it's more efficient to do hardwired.
No, not entirely, because even though most of our connectivity is hardwired, not everyone lives in the same type of environment that we do. Try getting a hardwired connection in Antarctica. It's not a good idea.
Okay,
Try getting a hardwired connection in the middle of the ocean. Not a good idea. Try getting a hardwired connection on a plane. Not a good idea.
I understand that, but those are exceptions, correct?
Yeah, but you want to fill in the gaps. The whole point of us having satellites is because there are exceptions, and we want to make sure that those exceptions are accounted for.
Well, I'm saying exceptions are more so, if they're exceptions, then they're not necessarily more efficient. You're just saying that the primary source of communication is hardwired ground level tower communication, and then the satellites are for exceptions. But if you're saying that they're for exceptions and they're filling in the gaps, they aren't. Satellites compared to ground aren't more efficient then. That
No,
would be
they're more
false.
efficient for certain
For
aspects. Like,
exceptions.
for example,
For exceptions.
no, for example, GPS. Is GPS an exception in your view?
Is what? Say that again. Sorry.
Is GPS
Yeah, globe skeptic equals flat earther. Yeah, absolutely.
navigation an exception in your view?
An exception
I love flat earthers that deny they're flat earthers.
to ground.
Yeah.
It's
I don't
adorable.
know if it's a necessary exception.
Hey, Luke Patterson, what's up? Which one's the Flurf? Just got here. The guy on the left, that's made by Jim Bob, and he's a right-wing, science-denying person. And the guy on the right this is Red's Rhetoric. He's been around for a decade.
And I think that navigation
He is a Glover.
could be done through a modeling of the geography, as opposed to something that's like constantly rotating around the Earth and telling you stuff. Because once you have a model, is it not correct to say that once you have a model of the Earth, assuming that continents don't drastically change, navigation should be pretty much set in motion from a model? You don't need the physicality of the ongoing live data to do navigation once you have a model of Earth?
Yeah, well, once you have a model of Earth, that's great, but you also want to be able to navigate throughout that model in the most efficient manner. And what we found out is that GPS satellites provide that more efficient manner, because you have one satellite that's able to service thousands upon thousands of people in the continental United States alone, if not millions of people within the continental United States alone, I should say. You can then, like I said, lower the amount of infrastructure that you're actually dedicating to the cause.
But isn't GPS tower based though? Like ultimately,
No, it isn't.
it's not power based.
No, it's by satellites. You can actually see GPS satellites. If you go to a website called Heavens Above, they'll actually map out where the GPS satellites are in the sky. It's what we use for.
No, man. You ever drive through the Southwest? Through Arizona, New Mexico, Texas? Do you see a fucking tower? Does your phone work? No. Does your GPS work? Absolutely.
For our tracking software with telescopes here on Earth.
I thought GPS was tower triangulation, and that you fill in the gaps through triangulation, which happens to be very effective on the ground.
No, you can have it enhanced by towers, but that's only when there's towers.
It's not tower triangulation. You could do it that way, but it's not something that is the most efficient way of doing it.
Okay.
And the idea is that when you look at, for example, our weather models, our ability to communicate instantaneously all over the planet, we don't just rely on one technology. It's foolish to put all of our eggs in one basket. We want to make sure that we have a cumulative effort here to achieving a particular goal. And if the particular goal that we're after is great predictive capability, great reliability, so that if one system goes down, we have another as a backup, and also given the fact that it is in many industries a lot cheaper to do it this way, then satellites pose a great thing to invest in. This is why SpaceX is launching, an absolute fuck ton of them. Jesus Christ. They're launching, almost every week, 50 satellites at a time. And they're not doing that because it's unprofitable. They are making money from that endeavor.
Okay, so let's talk about the maintenance comparison. So what is the maintenance of a satellite rotating in space? What is the maintenance? What's the...
There is none.
There's no maintenance?
No.
Okay.
They have a lifespan of around 10 to 15 years. If you are talking I believe this is also the case for Starlink, although I could be wrong on that. But I do know that for geostationary satellites, we have a lifespan of those satellites of between 10 to 15 years, depending on the vendor.
Okay, so things just don't break. Satellites just don't break.
No, they're pretty durable. They're pretty good.
No, they're designed to be very reliable. In fact, the overwhelming majority of them outlive their
Look at his 5th grade fucking facial expressions.
Original planned life expectancy.
It's like he's trying to be serious, but show you that he's laughing too.
Okay, and so when they do lose their life, do you deorbit them or keep them in orbit?
All satellites have to be equipped with a way to end their life. That's an FCC rule. You have to have a way to turn them off and end their life.
You can deorbit them, yes. It all depends on which orbit they are in. And so this kind of is
lower or higher. Got it.
So if you're in low Earth orbit, then it would be a lot easier to deorbit a satellite. Whereas if you're in a higher orbit, you don't deorbit it at all.
Mm-hmm. It takes a real long ladder, Dakin.
Do is you boost it up into what's known as a graveyard orbit, where it's out of the way of functioning satellites.
Okay, and are all of the different phases of, or let's say levels of orbit, distance, I guess we can call it, altitude or whatever, from the surface, do they all require ongoing boosters to keep the velocity in relation to the fallingness, the falling around the Earth, the velocity?
You're talking about station keeping fuel?
Yeah, like so which satellites, if you just leave them alone, will eventually meet friction and eventually lose speed and fall? Like which satellites are those?
Not in geostationary. In geostationary orbit, like let's say, and I should be very, very clear here that if a satellite does fail, it's very, very rare that it does, but it does happen. You are correct. But even if you were to completely wipe out the memory of a satellite and it just stopped working, it wouldn't fall to Earth in geostationary. It would stay there for millions of years.
Millions,
yes.
Okay, so are there any satellites that, if not kept up to speed or velocity, will fall?
Those would be low Earth. I know that it happens with the International Space Station because it needs periodic reboost because it is dealing with the friction of the upper atmosphere.
I know it happened to Skylab. I remember living through that.
But the higher up you go,
fell in Australia, didn't it? Didn't it hit Australia?
The less of that friction you're actually dealing with. So for something like Starlink satellites, they are purposely placed at a low enough altitude where you will experience some atmospheric friction. Okay. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about molecules of air here, so it's not a lot. But eventually, you will need to do a reboost.
Okay, so there are essentially, it says about 11,000 something satellites, and 5,000 of them are low orbit. Mm-hmm. So what I'm asking is that for satellites that require a booster, you're saying that the intermittence of needing a boost is few and far between, or is there a set amount that it does need a boost, and how do you know it needs a boost?
You would look at its altitude relative to the altitude it's supposed to be at. So your orbital velocity is actually determined by your altitude. The closer you are to Earth, the faster.
Yep, Western Australia.
You will orbit as a result. If you're further away from Earth, then the slower your orbit is going to be as a result.
So
you can look at these changes and see if they are outside of a
good point, RT.
particular threshold. Once they approach that threshold or get past that threshold, you can then activate your.
Yeah, he just doesn't know anything. He's just using them as a fucking Google search bar.
Reboost to get it within your acceptable range that you predetermined.
Who activates the reboost?
I believe it's whoever is the owner of that satellite. So, for example, SpaceX is doing continuous monitoring of their constellation, they call it. And if any of the satellites go beyond a particular threshold, then they are the ones that command the satellite to do the thing it needs to do to reboost itself.
Oh, so do you get fined if you don't reboost your satellite?
No, you just lose a satellite, or it falls into a different orbit that you may not have wanted it to be in the first place.
Oh, okay. So yeah, it seems like I'm just wondering, like, if there's enough private satellites that there's some sort of obligation to stay reboosted to keep your boosters up and up to date. Because if it's the case that it does need a boost, then what you're saying is that satellites don't come with something that can tell you its own altitude and then boost itself, right? Just like an at-home booster.
I'm assuming that these telescopes or not telescopes, these satellites are very advanced, and so.
Yeah, a ham satellites don't have boosters. So
I'm pretty sure it knows its own altitude. I'm pretty sure it knows its own orbital velocity.
So then it would never lose altitude then, because if it knew, it would know to keep its altitude. So this notion that there are some satellites that lose altitude, tell the owner, and then maybe the owner from their satellite app gives it a booster and it puts it back up to its correct altitude. But then if you're saying if these satellites are so advanced that they know their own position, geospatially, altitude and attitude, that they self-correct, but then aren't you saying that, now you're saying, not that it's a contradiction, but now is there a variety of satellites and some require the owner to hit the booster and some just never move they never get out of improper altitude and attitude?
What I'm saying is that there's more than one way to skin a cat. And whether SpaceX has to take manual control every now and then, or it's something that's completely automated, either way, a reboost is done. And when
I need to put this on my soundboard for pieces of shit like this.
Run rings round you logically.
Yeah, run rings round you logically.
When that reboost is done, they get placed right back into their proper orbit, and then life goes on as normal.
Gotcha. And then there's a life shelf life of, I guess, what's the fuel for satellites to reboost?
I think it's like what is it? Hydrazine or something like that. It could be RP1 kerosene. It could be cold gas thrusters for all I know. It could be xenon. So there's so many different options in that case. I don't know. It depends on the manufacturer of the satellite and the satellite itself.
Yeah.
What their requirements are, how much delta V is needed for its particular lifespan, what orbit is it going to go into. There's so many different answers to that question.
Okay, and then deorbiting is fascinating to me as well because also the same question of like when do you know to deorbit something and why is one question I would have. Like, why does something get deorbited or not deorbited? What would be the reason for that distinction?
If it no longer has station keeping fuel, then it would have been considered to have outlived its life expectancy, because its life expectancy is determined by the amount of station keeping fuel it has. And so once you reach a particular threshold and you know you have just enough to deorbit to not leave space junk, then that's when you would implement your deorbit program on that particular satellite.
And there's are there several ways to deorbit, or just one way to deorbit?
Unless you're going to crash into something, the way that you deorbit a satellite is to slow it down. So you slow down your satellite, and that's how you deorbit a satellite.
You slow it down with the boosters?
Correct.
So, okay, so then when you slow it down, eventually it just falls to the Earth, or?
Correct. If you slow it down, it falls to the Earth. That is correct.
And then who determines how and where it falls?
I believe there is a point over the Pacific called Point Nemo. It is the furthest point from land, and I think Point Nemo is also called like the satellite graveyard for a reason. The one thing that companies don't want to do when they're deorbiting their satellites is to get sued by anybody, and so they try to deorbit them in the middle of the ocean where they know no one's going to be around to potentially get injured by debris. Not that much debris makes it to the ground, but they want to play it safe, and so usually they will deorbit it over in the middle of the ocean. That's usually how that works.
Oh, in the ocean? Okay.
Correct.
And so it also says that when people deorbit, they say that the satellite itself disintegrates.
Yeah, most of it does disintegrate. Absolutely.
So it's not it's not a satellite landing in the ocean. It's a disintegrated satellite, or
they deorbit it over the ocean. Whether or not it hits the ocean is a totally different question.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Is like if it's just like turned to dust level disintegration, I guess it's just a matter of where to properly litter the disintegrated thing. But certainly, if it disintegrated coming through the Earth's atmosphere to some negligible amount of dust, then it wouldn't really matter where it landed. It would just be like, mommy, look at that, like that weird dust cloud. But I'm not certain to what extent when they say, because what I read is it disintegrates, like actually disappears from the friction of the atmosphere coming down. So I'm wondering.
Correct.
Like, well,
it does disintegrate, but there's always a chance that a screw or whatever could get through and everything like that. And so it's a precaution that they're taking.
Okay.
They're very, very confident that most, if not all, the satellite will disintegrate upon reentry, but it's always a precautionary move to deorbit it over the ocean where there is no population centers.
Got you. So I mean, technically, when it disintegrates, it could be picked up by wind and miss the ocean, or.
No, not like that. I mean, if it turns to dust, then I guess it could go with the wind at that point. But the harder stuff would of course go through the wind.
Oh, okay. Do you know how many? I don't know this, but do you know how many satellites relative to how many exist are deorbited?
That I don't know the exact answer. What I do know is that SpaceX and their Starlink is relatively low Earth, and they have thousands of satellites in low Earth orbit. And the going component, or the going model of their plan for Starlink, is that each and every single one of those satellites to have the capability to be deorbited. So I do know that for SpaceX, at least with their thousands of satellites, it is in the game plan that each one of those satellites will, live throughout its useful lifetime. So whether that's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever the case may be, I guess it depends on which version of the satellite they're actually going on. Some may have longer life expectancy than others, but all of them are made with the understanding that they will be eventually deorbited.
Gotcha. Because it seems like there were just because the same reason there's people, organizations like Green, like the Green Party, who are concerned with the environment. Is there like a counter space satellite? What would you call it? I don't even know what you'd call it. Like an organization that's like anti-satellite. I mean, is that a thing?
Yes, I have. They're called flat earthers.
No, not the denial of satellites. The people who are against it because of they can call the space like sort of an environmental problem. Like are
yes,
those people?
Absolutely, yes. They're called flat earthers.
Because, the same people.
Yeah, they're the exact same people because they don't believe that satellites make it to space. They think they immediately get ditched into the ocean and thus litter.
Oh, that's from that view. I'm talking about space, like the environment in space, like assuming that there is 11,000 things in there that eventually will turn to junk if there's any concern of what that could mean. I mean, it's essentially like obviously it wouldn't be a problem now considering the amount of space available, but.
PETA type organization.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I don't believe one exists.
Right.
According to my live chat, a good friend of mine by name Astronomy Life, who I will be bringing up in a moment, he says, quote, Starlink satellites are designed to be less resilient to reentry in case of unintentional deorbit, such as the recent Falcon 9 second stage failure. So yeah, recently there was a Falcon 9 that launched. First stage performed as it should, but the second stage had a little bit of an oopsie, and they were able to get to orbit, but unfortunately it wasn't a high enough orbit where they wouldn't immediately get deorbited by the atmosphere. So they didn't get high enough to get over the atmosphere and thus were deorbited. And as far as I'm
Davey Mo.
aware, it didn't cause any issues whatsoever besides losing a shit ton of satellites. So
Yeah.
that sucks for them.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess I'm
Hey, Lucas, who else have I missed? I was like, concentrating on something else. I think that's it.
looking to the graveyard and like, what's the rapid production and deployment of satellites, and is there a threshold at which like, you could be like, oh, you're creating an actual physical layer in space, like an actual physical wall at some point. I mean, not in our lifetime, but that
A physical wall? Do you know how big satellites are? Do you know how big the fucking Earth is? You know, there are fewer satellites than there are cars in the United States. Do you think if you took all those cars and spread them all around the Earth, they'd be anywhere near each other?
That seems to be a logical consequence.
Well, yes. If you just keep adding more and more satellite to our sphere of influence, eventually you will come to a point where there's just way too many of the damn thing.
Yeah, see that when he goes, what a bad actor.
Things, I totally agree with that. But we haven't hit that yet. I do know that a few astronomers are very.
He purses his lips, raises his eyebrows. He's a fucking dick. He's a dipshit. Look at him.
Very, very angry with the amount of satellites that are being put up there because they're constantly getting photobombed within their shots. And yeah, that does suck for them. But for just the feasibility aspect, there's plenty of room as of right now. And I'm pretty sure they're going to fill every single nook and cranny because the economics have spoken and the economics work for what they're trying to do. Because SpaceX is not going to be the only game in town when it comes to their constellation. Even Amazon, of all people, is trying to launch their own constellation. And they've contracted 3 different companies to send up their satellites.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's going to be a space tax?
I would imagine eventually, but I don't know if it has happened yet.
Mm. And then let's say I raise some money.
No one owns space. No one owns space, so who's going to tax it?
Wanted to launch a satellite. Do you know what's required for that to happen?
As far as I'm aware, you would just have to contract a company to, one, either build a satellite and they do all the paperwork for you, or you can get in contact with NASA directly somehow. I've never launched a satellite, so I don't know what paperwork is required.
Or you could call a ham radio club. There's one in Mississippi that I dealt with. It's where I took my test, my ham radio test, or the second ham test, the next one up, technician, or a general. I'm not sure. Anyway, but yeah, you can call them, ask them what they had to go through to launch their satellite. It was a Hamsat. I'm not sure which one it is, but yeah, they can tell you how they put it up, what they had to pay, how much it cost them, and if you have a radio, you can communicate through it with a highly directional antenna pointed straight at fucking space. And then you can ask them if they launched it on a balloon.
The one thing that I do know about the satellite deployments is that you would always go through a
paperwork, government bad, yes.
Launch provider, and that launch provider would be able to guide you through the process. So if you called them and said, okay, I have this particular satellite I want to place in this particular orbit, what do I need to do to make it to that particular?
Yeah, he sells a book of memes. He sells a printed book of memes.
Orbit, they can walk you through the process.
Gotcha. Yeah, because that's what I was wondering.
I mean, who's going to buy a printed book of memes?
Or is there any private company that's not the main authoritative launchers that can start launching satellites themselves?
I don't know. I don't know what you mean by authoritative launchers. There are private companies launching all the time. For example, SpaceX, like I mentioned previously, ULA, which is United Launch Alliance, Rocket Lab, which is a CubeSat launcher for now, but they will be launching the Neutron rocket, which is a little bit bigger. There's also Blue Origin. That's Jeff Bezos, the guy that does Amazon. Mm-hmm. He has his own rocket company called Blue Origin. He's going to be launching the New Glenn. He was actually contracted to launch a couple payloads to Mars. That should be happening in October.
CEO entrepreneur.
Relatively soon. Ariane Space, I know, is through ESA. I don't believe that is a private company. I think that is government, although could be wrong. Please correct me if I am wrong on that. And there are, and one more private company that I know of that has gone orbital, which is Firefly Aerospace. They recently launched and put a few satellites in the orbit. So all of those are private companies. They are not through NASA. They're not through the government. They do get government contracts, but they're not government themselves.
Oh, what did you say? He's going to, what do you mean by payloads? Jeff Bezos is going to do what to Mars? What is he going to deliver?
Payload is another name for a satellite. So, for example, a payload is anything you put on the rocket. So, for example, Elon Musk launched his Tesla to space. If you remember that, that was the payload for the Falcon Heavy.
Is that trackable? Can I see that with a good enough telescope? The car.
Well, the next time it flies by Earth, sure. If you want to see what other people were able to capture with it, I would recommend tuning into Astronomy Live. Astronomy Live was actually able to track the space Tesla, let's call it.
Yeah.
Astronomy Live was able to track the space Tesla as it left the sphere of influence of the Earth.
So they lost it, or
no? It was meant to go out. They know exactly where it is. It's just not close enough to Earth to be seen with a telescope right now. So according to Astronomy Live, he says, "quote I tracked it out to 8 times the distance to the moon. Nice job, good sir.
Strami Live, if you would like to do me a favor, you have a wrench in mind, go ahead and copy and paste a link to that, and I'll share it. That way, I want people to be able to see that awesome tracking that you did with your telescope. But yeah, he tracked it out to 8 times the distance of the moon. So yeah, that's pretty awesome. But if I can kind of go back in, when you're asking all these questions, we're talking about the economics and who has what contract and how. But at the end of the day, I still have one question I want answered, and that is, do you believe that satellites in the orbital sense actually exist?
I mean, I could assume that they exist. I just don't have a great reason myself personally, other than just appealing to people saying so. I mean,
all right.
That's all I got.
So would you accept measurements of, like, for example, if I was able to measure the altitude, the size, and the speed of the International Space Station, for example, would you accept that as evidence and or proof, depending on how you define proof, evidence and or proof of the existence of satellites?
No, I would say that it's proof and measurement of an object.
Yes, but an object that is traveling at 4.7 miles per second, which is orbital velocity, at an altitude of 250 miles, which is space, and it is the size of a football field, which is what the space station is.
Yeah.
So I would be independently able to do all of that. That on its own wouldn't be convincing to you?
Not necessarily. I don't think it follows that if you can track and predict the observation of an object in space, that it follows that there's all these satellites doing what they're doing. It doesn't necessarily follow. No. So I wouldn't take that because it's not a logical follow.
Well, that's the thing. We're not making a prediction.
Well, it's like basically an inductive. You're just doing inductive reasoning, right? You're saying that, well, if I see this out there and I could track it, therefore all these other things exist. You're saying it's reasonable to come to the conclusion that all these other things exist if this one thing exists, right?
I'm not making that jump. I'm speaking specifically about the International Space Station. We'll get to the other satellites later, but just for this particular conversation, I'm just talking about one particular satellite, which is the International Space Station. So if I was able to show you measurements where myself and Astronomy Live, because this is exactly how we did it, where we independently, outside of NASA, outside of any government agency, we were able to independently verify the altitude, the size, and the speed of the International Space Station.
Yeah.
Would that be good enough for you just for the International Space Station? Not talking about the other satellites.
No, again, I would just conclude that there's an observable object in space that's moving in a certain way. I mean,
okay.
That would be a fair.
What about a certain fucking speed?
Conclusion. I mean, that's exactly what you'd say, right? But you're saying, well, this thing is this other thing. What something is a different. Do you agree that what something is a different question as how something is?
Depending on how you're phrasing that, yes, it is.
Sure. Well, there you go.
But the deal is the exact same, regardless if it's a functioning thing or something that's in the shape of a giant pair of gonads. It doesn't matter, because an object in orbit is still an object in orbit. Whether or not it's a functional satellite is a different question. I'm saying that there's something there in orbit.
Well, yeah,
anyway.
I would say that would be begging the question as far as what orbit is concerned. So, is it possible that there's an apparatus?
Begging the question of what orbit is. What the fuck are you talking about, begging the question?
Apparatus that
we know what an orbit is, dipshit. There's no begging the question about it.
You're observing that has a particular flight path that's predictable, that isn't necessarily at the effective orbit, but rather some sort of flight?
No, it wouldn't be able to be within Earth's atmosphere. Not at all.
No.
You're saying it's logically not possible for something to be in flight?
Yes, I'm saying it is actually impossible for it to be any sort of flying apparatus. Flight is impossible at those speeds. When we measured the altitude, size, and speed of the International Space
Look at him. Look at how fucking silly he is.
Station. Do you know what speed that we were able to measure?
No.
We got it at 4.7 miles per second. Now, let me put that into different numbers. That's 17,500 miles per hour.
Okay.
If you were to go that fast within Earth's atmosphere, you would rip yourself apart. Not only that, but with the telescopes that
How fast is that in miles per hour?
Say what?
17,500 miles per hour.
Isn't
He just told you, dumb fuck.
the escape velocity for Earth 25,000 or 25,000 miles per hour?
Yeah, but we're not trying to hit escape velocity.
I know, but you're saying nothing could fly that fast, but escape velocity assumes flight.
Escape velocity.
No, it doesn't. No, rockets don't fly. They're propelled. Jesus fucking Christ. They're designed to go fast until they leave the atmosphere.
Velocity assumes velocity.
You said something can't fly if it's going that fast. And I'm saying, well, if escape velocity is a thing, and you have to have some sort of apparatus or propulsion to
Yes, escape Earth's gravity.
get you to 25,000 miles per hour, that's a contradiction then.
No, It's
Yes.
not
What do you
ideal.
call it? What do you call it going from 10,000 miles, 1,000 miles per hour to 25,000 miles per
I think
hour?
you misunderstood what I'm talking about here. Let me see if I can repeat so that we're not talking past each other. When I say you can't go that fast in Earth's atmosphere, what I'm saying is you can't go that fast in Earth's atmosphere. You can go that fast when you're in an environment that you're not being continuously slowed down and dragged down by the atmosphere. That's why, satellites are at the altitude that they are. You want to get over the atmosphere so that you can go that fast, so that you can hit orbital velocity.
Isn't the Earth's atmosphere extend to the moon?
Not in the way that you're probably.
No, there's just a hydrogen cloud that's real big. So again, he's one of these dumb motherfuckers who thinks, oh, our atmosphere is hydrogen and it goes past the moon. That means the moon's inside our atmosphere.
Thinking no, it goes from 1 bar.
See, if fucking Red probably knows exactly what he's talking about.
Atmospheric pressure, and then it gets thinner and thinner and thinner the higher up you go.
So wait,
the article that you're probably referencing that says the atmosphere extends all the way to the moon, we're talking about each individual molecules, which is not the same as what we have here.
Let me try to
in an airplane type of environment.
Let me try to give back to you what I think you're saying. You can correct me. You're saying that the ISS, as you're referring to, that's moving at 17,500 miles per hour, right? You're saying it's impossible for an object to move that fast if it's not in orbit, right?
Yes, it has to be in orbit outside of the Earth's atmosphere.
Okay, where is there a defined line of where the Earth's atmosphere ends?
The accepted line for space is about 100 kilometers. After that, the amount of speed that you would need to generate lift on your wings would be roughly equivalent to how fast you would need to go to be in orbit anyway. So at that particular altitude, then you wouldn't be able to.
Exactly, RT-96. Things that hit escape velocity don't do 25,000 miles per hour in the atmosphere.
To generate enough lift before you hit orbital velocity and are essentially in orbit anyway. So at that altitude, your wings essentially become dead weight. They become useless. Might as well get rid of them.
Okay, so then my question is, what's happening then between going 17,500 miles per hour and reaching 25,000 miles per hour? What's happening in between those two speeds?
A lot of air and a lot of distance.
Well, there's nothing because the International Space Station doesn't go 25.
No, I'm not asking if. No, I'm not asking if that's going 25 miles per hour, 1,000 miles per hour. I'm saying for something to escape the Earth's gravity, right? The pull, they need to be going 25,000 miles per hour, correct?
I believe so, but they're not escaping.
I know. I'm asking you a question. If you wanted to escape, right? I'm
asking. All due with respect,
you're not answering the question.
Yeah, but all due with respect, this question is irrelevant to the.
It's not irrelevant. It's actually it's relevant to the topic itself, which is the maneuvering and the ability to do things in what you call space, whether it's 60 miles up, 250 miles up, or further than that. I'm actually talking about what is the engineering in play. If you said an object, because your statement is this: an object that's moving as fast as the ISS can't do that unless it's in orbit, right? That's your statement.
Yes.
I'm asking you, what is it? What do you call it when an object goes from anything below 25,000 miles per hour and it reaches 25,000 miles? What's happening? I'm actually asking you that. What's happening such that an object goes from 10,000 miles per hour to 25,000 miles per hour? What's happening?
An acceleration? I actually don't know what
an acceleration. Yeah, no, I'm asking that. What's the acceleration? What's catalyzing and engineering the acceleration?
Rockets.
Rockets. So you just said something can't be flying, right? You said to be going.
Reds is also toned down a lot. He is toned down a lot.
17,500 miles per hour. You can't have anything other than orbit that accounts for that because you're moving too fast. Then I ask you, how do you get from 17,000 miles per hour to 25,000 miles per hour? And your answer is rockets.
Okay, so
that's a contradiction.
No, it's not a contradiction, man.
Think I understand where you're getting confused here. So let me try to break this down. If you're having an object that's going 17,500 miles per hour, and let's say you need fuel to maintain that speed, how long is that fuel going to last?
The fuel, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to last.
Well, let's think about this logically here. We're talking about using fuel and having enough energy within that fuel to get up to 17,500 miles per hour.
Yeah.
And we know how big a single stick rocket is. It's pretty massive, but not infinite. And eventually it will run out of fuel, correct?
Sure.
Okay, so how is it that the International Space Station can then stay at its orbit for 20 years?
That's irrelevant to my question.
No, it isn't.
Oh, actually, it isn't, because what you're saying is that, or at least what I'm interpreting you saying, is that you don't believe that the terminology, or I should say the physics, makes sense because, well, rockets can get there and stay there. That shouldn't be any issue whatsoever. Actually, no, you need something. You need physics itself to help you with that, which is orbit. Orbit is the only reason.
Let's go back to your statement, and you could either double down on it or retract it.
I think a clarification is needed. Rockets get you to that speed. Orbits keep you at that speed.
Great. So you're saying that nothing can be traveling at 17,500 miles per hour unless it's orbit, correct?
Constantly. Correct.
Constantly. Okay. Correct. Now, the fact that you said rockets.
Matter of fact, it has to go that fast to stay in orbit. But there's no resistance. There's no wind resistance, air resistance.
could get you from 17,500 miles per hour to 25,000 miles per hour. That means that you can have something else.
No. You gradually build up that speed till you get out of the atmosphere, and then you go really, 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 really fast.
What else would there be?
The fact that you're appealing to rockets to increase your speed or even lower speed means that you can use fuel and engineering to manipulate speed. So even this, your first statement, like to get you to 17,500 miles per hour, you're saying now, well, something can't be moving that fast constantly without.
If he was a toddler, this would be adorable. But he's an adult, so it's just sad.
Out what we call orbit, correct?
Yeah, but
Be
the
right
International
back.
Space Station, once it gets up to that speed, it's not constantly under rocket propulsion. And so something else is obviously at work here. So what do you believe else could be at work there, if not orbits itself?
I don't know. I don't know.
I know. It's orbits. That's how the International Space Station is doing what it does. When we looked at the International Space Station, when we looked at it, it wasn't under continuous rocket fire. You would have saw that. It would have made a light. But
does it need a boost?
Every now and then.
So then of course, dude, you just contradicted yourself again. The fact that it needs a boost.
That's fine.
The fact that it needs a boost means it's not just orbit.
Yes, it is just.
Does it need a boost?
Yes, it does need.
Then
a
it's
boost.
not just orbit. That's called A doesn't equal A, dude.
It is just orbit, sir. I will explain how you're wrong.
Does it need a boost?
Yes.
Then it's not just orbit.
Then would you like me to explain how you're wrong?
Explain how it's not a contradiction.
Okay, cool. So this is the part where we have our conversation. So when it's in orbit, it's able to stay up there without needing a Falcon 9 continuously pushing on it. Now, an atmosphere is moving against it while it is in orbit. It gradually, ever so slightly, slows it down. That doesn't change the fact that it's in orbit. It is a stable enough orbit for multiple orbits, multiple rounds, over and over and over again. There's a thing called a stable orbit, which is what we would see with, like, for example, geostationary satellites. You have partially unstable orbits, which is where the International Space Station's at. And then you have totally unstable orbits, like what happened with the Falcon 9 failure. There's more than one way to skin this cat. There's more than one way to describe these things. And what I think you're getting bogged down here is the terminology in which we describe these things. So if we were to look, you said engineering could describe things. Rockets don't have infinite fuel, my guy. They don't have infinite fuel. In order for the International Space Station to even be possible, then something else would have to do the work. And the other thing that does the work, where they can actually maintain this orbit with only periodic reboosts, which are not to the scale of a full-scale Falcon 9, is because it has traveled at orbital velocity. It's at an altitude where orbits are a thing. And obviously, it's traveling fast enough that the atmosphere isn't ripping it apart. And the third thing I was going to bring up is that when we looked at the International Space Station, you see these massive, absolutely massive solar panels off the side of this thing. It looks like a giant H. And these solar panels make this thing the most unaerodynamic craft ever. It looks, this is obviously something that wouldn't fly in atmosphere. And so...
Why is it aerodynamic? What is it aerodynamic for?
No, it's not aerodynamic. That's my point.
Oh, you said it's not aerodynamic.
It's not aerodynamic. It's the most unaerodynamic thing that you can possibly...
Doesn't need to be.
Imagine. And so the mere fact that this unaerodynamic spacecraft with these very thin solar panels aren't just breaking off mean that it's in an environment where wings would be useless in generating lift.
So what you're saying is that your statement isn't that only orbit is necessary. Your statement is that what you call orbit, the constant falling forward, if you will, very far out, keeps motion, but you need a boost every once in a while. But you're also saying that the particular level of atmosphere, like some tiny molecules or whatever you would say is pressing against the ISS, you're saying that it definitely won't speed up, right? Is that what you're saying too? Like it won't speed up on its own if you just leave it?
Well, yes, it will speed up, but I don't know what you mean.
Well,
could you repeat that question?
Sure, sorry, it was a little confusing. I was saying that imagining that something called orbit keeps something moving in a particular speed and altitude, so to speak. I'm asking, well, if you need a booster to keep the velocity up, do you need a booster to keep the velocity down too?
I'm going to try and answer that. I might be going off into the weeds here, but try to drive back in if I can.
Okay.
But when we're talking about orbits, the orbit by itself is fine. However, there's something in addition to orbits that we also deal with, and that is the atmospheric drag that we're dealing with at that particular altitude. Now, the further out you go, the less of an issue the atmosphere becomes. So remember when I brought up geostationary satellites? Geostationary satellites are so far away from the Earth that the amount of drag that they could possibly experience from the atmosphere is so minuscule that those orbits will be stable for millions of years. The further down or the closer you get to Earth, the more drag you're going to experience. Now you may have an orbit that's stable for only tens of years. And then you go further down, you may have an orbit that's stable for only a few months or weeks or days, depending on your altitude. The orbit itself is fine, but we're also dealing with the atmosphere. And NASA and the controllers of the International Space Station, they account for this with periodic reboosts. They said, okay, we know that this orbit is going to be stable for most of the time, but there's going to be that 1% of the time that we're going to have to do a periodic reboost to keep it in low Earth orbit. Now, they want it in low Earth orbit because the area around the space station is relatively free of debris because other objects that don't have the capability of doing periodic reboost will eventually fall down to Earth, leaving the space
No, he's not improvising, you stupid fuck. Jesus.
around the International Space Station mostly free of hazards, and it's easier to get spacecrafts up there because it's closer down. So
I was talking about a fucking super chat got put on there.
you need less delta V to actually get there, less fuel, less energy to actually get to the International Space Station. All of this is taken into account. And so when we're looking at the International Space Station, we say, okay, even on a bad day, even on an absolute bad day at its lowest altitude before periodic reboost, this thing is going to be traveling really fucking fast. We're talking 4.7 miles every single second. Every single second. And then we ask ourselves, okay, can a plane go that fast within the atmosphere? No. Can a balloon ever hope to go that fast within the atmosphere? No. Both a plane and a balloon would rip itself to shreds. Okay, how does it look? Well, it looks like what an International Space Station would look like with these huge-ass solar panels on each side. And the solar panels make it really shit in Earth's atmosphere. It would just rip itself apart again. I mean, it would be really, really shit in Earth's atmosphere. And so, okay, so it's traveling 17,500 miles an hour. It's 250 miles up. And it's, looking like a space station. Basically, we come to the conclusion where if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, acts like a duck, it's safe to say it's a duck.
Yeah, but the question was, does the space station need a booster to maintain a lower speed as opposed to just a higher speed?
If you're referring to deorbits, then yes. SpaceX was actually contracted to do a feasibility study or to start engineering the
Yeah, smug fucking expression.
equipment needed to
It really does have a punchable face.
eventually deorbit the International Space Station and to do it safely. What they're going to do is that they're going to dock a Dragon spacecraft to the front of the station, and then they're going to use a series of modified Super Draco thrusters, I think, and they're going to fire in the opposite direction of travel. So it's traveling forward, they're going to fire backwards. That's going to slow down its velocity, which means that its orbit is also going to drop, and it's going to drop so much that's going to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and burn up.
Okay, without deorbiting as the goal, the question again is, we have an orbiting ISS, right, at 250 miles out at a certain speed, and you're saying eventually it loses speed, so it needs a boost. I'm asking you, does it ever gain speed and need a boost in the opposite direction?
No, it doesn't gain speed in terms of what would be a stable orbit. No, it doesn't ever gain speed. It only loses speed at that particular altitude. There are certain altitudes that you could theoretically get to where there's no change in velocity whatsoever. That's not the case because of the atmospheric drag.
Okay, but if it was higher, it would gain speed?
No, if it was higher, it wouldn't lose or gain. It would just maintain.
It would maintain. So, okay, so there isn't a phenomenon where if you're breaking free fully without an added force or release of mass, let's say, into a vacuum, you wouldn't increase speed.
You got to think of it like this. Orbits are essentially free fall. I guess I should have asked this.
That's what I was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know how orbits actually work?
Well, just correct me if I'm wrong, is a combination of falling constantly paired with velocity moving forward, and it's basically an illusion, but it's actually falling. It's just falling in a direction that's constant around an object.
That is correct.
Yes. So basically think of it like this. If I have a ball and I throw it sideways, it's going to curve and hit the ground. If I take that same ball and throw it harder, it's going to curve and hit the ground, but slightly further away. All of a sudden, I turn into Superman, and I can chuck that thing really hard. So what if I chuck it so hard that the curve of its arc matches the curve of the Earth? The ball would always be curving towards Earth, but Earth would always be curving away just as fast. And the end result is that it would keep going around and around and around. Now, you could slow the ball down, which would make its arc shorter, thus impacting the Earth, if you had something to slow it down, like, for example, the atmosphere. So what if we threw that same ball in an environment where we didn't have to deal with that pesky atmospheric drag nonsense? Well, then it would just stay around and around and around. What rockets are doing is that they're simply, and for lack of a better term, throwing their objects around the planet so that they can go around and around and around over and over and over again. And so if you slow down your velocity, if you slow it down, then your orbit becomes unstable because the path of your arc intersects the surface of the Earth. And that's not good. You want to go fast enough so that the path of your arc goes around the planet.
Okay.
Right, and you don't want to go so fast that you leave the influence of the planet.
So based on that, would you say it's a misnomer to say there's that zero gravity? That's just a term for the absence of an effect.
Yeah, it's not called zero gravity. It's called zero G. But I can see where the confusion is at. It's commonly referred to as microgravity, and I don't like that term either. But essentially, they are in a state of perpetual free fall. That's why astronauts are floating. They actually experience. I did the math on this one time, so I'm just gonna.
Hey, Coco Rose.
Try to remember the number. I think they experience 88% of the gravity.
Hey, no problem.
That we experience down here on Earth. The reason why they're floating is because they're always in a state of free fall. But I believe that at that particular altitude, it is about 88% the amount of gravity that we feel here on the surface.
Gotcha. So it's just constant falling. So why is it 250 miles up, not 200 or not 300?
It can be any one of those altitudes. So, for example, and to my Chinese viewers, I am going to mispronounce this. please don't at me. I already acknowledge that my Chinese is quite shit. But I think it's called the Tiangong space station. It's the Chinese space station. Tiangong, I believe it's pronounced. I could be totally wrong on the pronunciation, and if so,
Tiangong?
so I do apologize to all 2 Chinese viewers. But Tiangong is actually at a lower altitude than the International Space Station, if memory serves correct.
Okay,
or
so
it could be slightly higher. But essentially, any one of those altitudes is fair game so long as you can do so stably, so that you're not dealing with the constant buffeting of the upper atmosphere. So if you wanted to put a space station at, let's say, 500 miles instead of 250, you could totally do that.
I have a question. What is the minimal altitude to reach that's objectively established where you would just perpetually fall forward?
I don't know the exact answer to that because it all depends on the atmosphere. I do know that the Kármán line is the point at which the lift from your wings wouldn't generate enough lift for you to not achieve orbital velocity in order for you to maintain that altitude. I know that much, but that is very much an unstable altitude to be at.
I have another question. If you go way up, like 250 or higher, and you just go straight out, and you don't curve the line and basically move forward in velocity, what happens to an object that you just bring up into space directly vertically without doing the curve sort of deployment of the object into a sort of orbital motion forward? What happens if you just bring an object up, let it out of the cage, but you're not moving in any other direction? You just let it out. What happens to that object?
You get what's called a suborbital launch. A suborbital launch is actually something that Jeff Bezos does as well. Remember Blue Origin I mentioned previously? They have another rocket called New Shepard, and despite looking most like a penis, it is a suborbital launch where paying customers pay $100,000 per seat. You may have seen a video from Dude Perfect, I believe. Dude Perfect actually took a ride on New Shepard, and New Shepard, they went straight up and went straight back down. And I'm serious, guys. Look this shit up. Look up New Shepard on Google. Try not to laugh. I'm dead serious. Do it right now, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But they launched straight up. And so when they launch straight up, they will experience about 6 minutes of weightlessness. But the reason why the reason why they experience that weightlessness is because once the acceleration stops, they're just following a parabolic arc that just takes them right back down again.
I understand, but I'm just asking a different question.
It's just so sharp that it just comes straight back down.
Let me ask you a different question. Is there an altitude at which you can deliver an object without moving it in any direction that mimics the spherical shape, right? That you just bring it up. Is there any altitude where you can release an object and it simply just stays exactly where it is relative to the surface?
No. Eventually, if you go high enough, then what would happen is that you would eventually get outside of the Earth's sphere of influence, where you wouldn't immediately be taken up by other gravitational influences, like, for example, the sun. Now, where that point is, I'm not exactly sure, but I'll even tell you this, that there is a spot called Lagrangian points. And this is kind of a mindfuck, so bear with me for a second. Lagrangian points are balance points in space, right in between the balancing between the Earth and the sun. And there's one in front of us and there's one in back of us. So, but for simplicity, let's go with Lagrangian 1, which is between the Earth and the sun. That spot is 1 million miles away from Earth. So at the very least, the Earth's sphere of gravitational influence, at the very least, reaches out to where the Lagrangian points are, which is, again, 1 million miles from Earth. So in order to be outside of the Earth's sphere of influence, you would have to, I would think, at least go that far out before you are sure to never come back.
I guess the question is, let me just get this clear. That point you're saying, if I asked you at what point up away from Earth will an object no longer just fall down? Is that what you're saying is the point, or that's not identical? That's not the same thing?
It would not fall down in the sense that it would just, at that point, be in its own orbit around the sun.
I know, but is that referring to the same point? So if I asked, is there a point at which you can release an object out away from the Earth where it just stayed where it was, it just floated? Are you saying that Lagrangian point is that point, or that's a different thing?
I would say it would be, you would have to at least go that far to have any hope of that happening.
Okay, so if that was the case, it was so far out, that wouldn't be, because what I was trying to lead to as an inquiry is, like, would it be ideal if satellites were just stationary and didn't move the way you're describing them so quickly?
Not at their altitudes. No, if you went to the altitudes of where satellites actually are, so, like, let's say between low Earth altitude and geostationary, if you stopped them in place, like if you somehow waved your magic wand and were able to just make them stop, cancel all velocity relative to the Earth, they would immediately fall right back down.
I got you. That's why I'm asking. Is there any altitude that is more local where we can see the effect where you're just not bound, but you could just have an object in space? And then from that view, you wouldn't need a booster. You wouldn't need anything. You would just need an object in space.
Not in that way, no.
Okay. The other thing I had a question about is just deploying getting things into orbit, because we talked about deorbit. If we can go on to getting them to orbit is another thing that I have questions about. Okay. So what you call a payload, whatever's inside of the rocket, you strap it to a rocket, it goes very far up, and that there's this point, I guess, could be 150 miles up, could be somewhere, there's some gradient, I assume.
I would say that if you want your satellite to have any sort of a lifespan that's worth a damn, it would be prudent to go beyond 300 miles.
Because of the mass, avoiding the mass.
Because of the atmosphere.
Yeah, okay, so let's say we do that. the process of that, you're taking what we know is ordinary propulsion against air, the way planes work. It's pushing against mass that's thicker, denser, closer to the surface. And then you get up to a certain amount, I don't know what the threshold is, where you no longer have the capability, it's weakened to be able to push against the mass, right? I want
Oh my God.
to ask, what is that threshold in miles?
I don't understand that question you asked. Are you saying that there's a
Rockets don't push off air, buddy.
point at which rocket propulsion becomes non-existent in space?
Well, the kind of rocket propulsion we need locally is the kind that pushes against air mass, right?
Well, rockets don't push against air.
No, in space you're saying they don't, but to get them out of the atmosphere, they're pushing against air, right?
Well, they're punching through the air, if that's what you're saying.
But they're pushing against, the thing that gives them the punch is the propulsion out the back against air, right?
No, not against air. It's just the mass being fired out the ass end.
Wait a second. So you're saying when someone launches a rocket from ground level, that's pushing not against air?
It pushes air out the way.
No, it pushes that explosion in the back, pushes the rocket forward. Third law of motion. I think it's third.
But as far as what provides the thrust, it's simply the act of
Third law of motion. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction.
taking the mass that is within your tank and firing out the ass end at Mach 5. So the best way I can describe this is that if you're sitting on a skateboard, if you're sitting on a skateboard,
yeah, you throw a bowling ball. Yeah,
the bowling ball and stuff like that. When you shove the bowling ball away from you, you are actually going to be pushed back. Now, there's a few things that happened at that particular moment. The first thing that happened was that you lost mass in that process because it started out as you and the bowling ball, and now what's left is you and not the bowling ball. So you ended up losing mass in that you traded mass for a force. You know, mass times acceleration equals your force. So you lost that mass and you translated that mass into a force. Rockets are doing the exact same thing, but instead of bowling balls, it's literally the fuel within their tank. And so the next thing that you need to do is that you need to be able to fire that out as quickly as possible. So the second thing you did was you shoved that mass really, really, really hard. Well, we're going to use something else to shove that mass. Instead of using our muscles, we are going to use a chemical reaction. And that chemical reaction releases a metric fuck ton of energy. It's loud, it's brutal, and if you've never been to a rocket launch, I highly recommend it. It is an amazing experience. But that energy, that release of energy, fires the mass out the ass end really, really, really fast. Because remember, force is mass times acceleration. So if you increase the acceleration, you're going to increase the force that is applied to the rocket. You're going to increase the amount of force that is produced. That act alone happens regardless of the medium that you're in. So it doesn't matter if you're dealing with 1 bar of atmospheric pressure, half a bar of atmospheric pressure, a quarter bar of atmospheric pressure. It doesn't matter because that reaction, that equal and opposite reaction still happens regardless of the...
Yeah, he does. And that's silly because rockets launch off a big fucking hole. A launch pad, there's a hole underneath the rocket that goes down and then out.
The environment that you are in.
So there's no land in front of underneath the rocket.
So when you're operating a boat, are you also saying that because you said no matter the medium, are you saying that a boat isn't pushing against water to make itself
pushing against water, but a boat isn't losing mass when it's doing so? A boat is pushing against a medium, the medium being water. A plane is pushing against air being its medium. A rocket doesn't need a medium to work because
Stop saying that, Red. You aren't understanding what he's saying. When he says push against air, he doesn't mean the nose pushing against air. He means the ass end of it.
The rocket is simply using its own mass as a
Stop misunderstanding.
Reaction mass, whereas a boat is using the water that's around it as the reaction mass.
Okay, I'm just saying, like you said, regardless of the medium, it seems to be the case that if it was regardless of the medium, you could have a boat that didn't use a propeller that we know of. It just releases gas under the water, and it would work as a boat just as well as using a propeller.
As if we're talking specifically about rockets,
oh, okay,
then it doesn't matter what medium that you're using. If you're talking about a boat and you're talking about a plane, those are entirely different things. It's like comparing regular 2% milk to almond milk, which is not milk, regardless what any vegan says.
Oh,
yeah, propellers equal rockets. What a dumbass he is.
Okay, so is that you're saying that applies to an airplane too? Horizontal?
No, it doesn't. What I said was that a boat and a plane are totally different concepts to rockets.
No, plane and rocket. No, I'm comparing a plane and a rocket. A horizontal plane that's going to take off. Is that pushing against air to get into the medium air?
No.
Into the medium? There's
no, dude.
Just air in that case, but yes, it is pushing against air, correct.
Yeah, I meant medium as in it now has mass to fin against to change its attitude and its direction using fins, right?
It operates by sucking in air in the front, shoving it out the back. It also reacts by flaps and control surfaces on the plane, correct? Rockets don't use that principle. They use the principle of every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And so they have their own mass that they're going to be expelling. Once you expel all that mass, then it's done. The rocket has been expended in that case. And so the only way that they're going to go to space, given the fact that there is no air to push off of in space, is to utilize that purpose. Otherwise, we would just be using jet engines to get to space.
No, I know. I'm that's what I was trying to make the distinction. I'm not sure how you could say an airplane is pushing against air by pushing out a force, but you're saying that a rocket right at ground level, when it's sitting vertical and launches, that's not pressing against the ground and then the air. You're saying that there's no.
No, it's not.
It's not pushing against the mass of the air at all?
If you have a basketball and you absolutely pelt that basketball against the ground, but your hands let go of the basketball before it pelt the ground, did you push against the ground or did you push against the basketball?
The ball?
The ball, exactly. So let's make that ball smaller. Let's make it marbles. I throw a fistful of marbles at the ground, but I let go of the marbles before it hit the ground. Did I push against the ground or did I push against the marbles?
I'm sorry, I missed the second one.
Okay.
He just made the thing smaller and added a bunch of them. Same question, man.
Just to repeat, let's say I had a fistful of marbles. I pelted the marbles at the ground, but I let go of the marbles before it hit the ground. Did I push against the marbles or did I push against the ground?
Marbles.
Marbles. Okay, let's make it even smarter. To molecules of gases that I fired out the backside of a rocket engine. Did I push against the molecules of gases at Mach 5 or did I push against the ground?
Say that one again.
Okay.
Same fucking question, dipshit. Do you have trouble following along? Holy shit. Holy fuck, he's asked you the same question twice. 3 times. Holy fuck, this guy's dumb.
Okay, so the same way with the ball, the same way with the marbles, we're just shrinking the spheres, I guess. And now we're at the point of individual atoms or molecules.
He's not paying a lick of attention. He's just scoffing.
Yeah. Did I push against the molecules or did I push against the ground?
At the launch, the actual launch, I guess you're pushing against the molecules?
The molecules, exactly. The ground is irrelevant to this.
Yeah, so how's it pushing against anything? How is it pushing against air needed to make it go?
To this equation.
Oh. Hey, McNurfer, how you doing?
So what a rocket engine will do is that, yes, it will push the air out of the way, but the air itself is not providing the thrust. What is providing the thrust, what is providing the force, is the chemical reaction within the rocket engine itself, and that chemical reaction is only happening because of the fuel that it itself is carrying. It's not...
I hope you're being sarcastic.
Taking any medium from the outside to replenish itself like you would with a boat propeller. It's taking everything around it and using that to move itself forward. Rockets don't do that. They have no intake. There is no vent to suck in air to make that reaction happen. It is entirely dependent on its...
Am I jealous? Have you seen his artwork?
Own mass and what it itself creates.
Okay, so what you're saying is a rocket taking off is slightly different than a plane taking off. That plane is pushing against air. When it's stationary, it's pushing against air. It's wanting to move forward against the air mass behind it and wants to cut through the air mass in front of it. And you're saying when a rocket takes off, none of those variables are really in play. You're saying that the massive explosion, the fire releasing from the rocket itself, the structure, is just the act of letting go of the mass, you're saying, is propelling it up into the air.
Yeah, well, firing it out, but yeah, same thing. Basically, it uses its
third law of motion, man.
Its own mass as reaction mass, and its own mass, i.e. the fuel that it's carrying, which is liquid oxygen, RP1 kerosene, that kind of thing. There's a chemical explosion happening, but it's a continuous explosion. That's what a rocket engine is, essentially. It is a controlled, continuous explosion, which releases a shit ton of energy, and that is what does the work.
It has to be a shit ton of energy because of the air mass, right? But it's less energy needed as you go up. Is that what you're saying?
No, not necessarily. No, the reason why you need a shit ton of energy is because you need to accelerate your mass to the appropriate velocity.
Right.
So even if you were in a perfect vacuum, it's still going to require energy to accelerate an object, any object with mass. So if I wanted to continuously accelerate that object and continue to accelerate all the way up to 17,500 miles an hour, even if you're in a vacuum, that's going to take a lot of energy. And so if you want to do that work, you're going to need a lot of energy.
Okay, cool. So then let's go back to the LEM, 1969 taking off from the moon. It's leaving behind.
Yeah. No atmosphere in the moon. Very low gravity, 1/6.
In the bottom section of the module, which holds about 4 to 6 tanks of combined things, oxidizer, water, fuel.
Rome is a real place. I've never seen a dinosaur. Okay, nobody's ever seen a dinosaur. We see the fossil remains of dinosaurs.
And then the smaller object.
And yes, fossil remains are real. Same as Rome. I've dug fossils up, man. Personally, dug them up. Dated them.
Has a fuel, what is it, Aerosine or something like that? Has water, has a scent engine, has helium, has an oxidizer. If you say that it requires a shit ton of energy, this is what I'm confused about, and maybe you could elucidate on this. Is that the little the little top part of the lunar module that took off? When you look at it, I have it on screen on my end. It has a couple of little nozzles for what they call the mass, where the mass would come out. To the immense energy that you needed would come out to not only push the object forward in some sort of trajectory, but also arrange.
Oh my God, you're fucking stupid. Holy shit, dude. You're dumb. They are not smart.
The attitude of the object as well. And I'm just wondering, like, from your view, is it still...
I mean, he thinks rockets have to push off air within our atmosphere. That's dumb. He's dumb. I learned about this shit in 8th grade, man. What the fuck happened to him?
Still hold true that this little piece of the LEM that's leaving from...
I mean, that's basically just as bad as not being able to add 2 + 2.
From the moon would also need a massive amount of energy to not only increase its...
Well, he lives in, what, Minnesota or some shit like that? Maybe all they taught him there was how to fucking cook elk.
Speed to about 5,000 miles per hour to meet up with the central command, but it would also need a massive amount of energy to self-correct, or correct, let's say, its attitude, orientation to...
Oh. Wow, you're a fucking retard. Holy shit, you're dumb.
The central command, is that correct?
Oh my God, man.
Yeah, let me just, I will answer
This guy's an idiot.
that question, but first let me say I do want to eventually get back to us acknowledging that the International Space Station is a thing. I think we kind of went into left field here, but as far as the small thrusters that you're talking about,
sure.
Those are known as reaction control thrusters, and those I believe are, again, I'm not an expert on this, so audience, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they use cold gas thrusters, just pure compressed.
No, 2 + 2 has one answer. No.
Gas.
No, see, that would be 2 + 2 + 2. See, there's a difference between 2 + 2 and 2 + 2 + 2. Wow.
And their only job is not to accelerate or to cause any sort of dramatic shift in orbit. Their only job, and the reason why they're so small, is to literally point the damn thing. So if I wanted to just point or increase my angle of attack in a certain direction, all I would have to do is just a little bit of puffs here.
I got you. Yeah. No, I understand.
I understand enough to get me pointed in the right direction.
I understand the principle, but I guess what I was looking at, the reason I asked is I was looking at this, and earlier I was looking at what Neil Armstrong was training on, and he was training on a little, like, it was basically a machine.
It's called the flying bedstead.
Like that had a jet under it that pointed down at the ground that got it into the air. But he said this is the thing he's practicing doing a maneuver. But in this case, you're using a jet beneath you that's keeping you elevated, and then you're using sort of a tilt.
Were all those flights untethered? Most of them were tethered. Most of them were attached to a crane. But maybe the later ones weren't.
Maneuvering method to change direction, kind of like a helicopter look where you tilt down and it kind of goes forward.
That action was gimbaling.
Gimbaling, okay, that's a good word for it. So with this though, that's what I was confused is how that was adequate practice, given that in this machine you actually have to practice using
all this anti-science talk. What anti-science talk? What are you talking about?
These tiny nozzles, perfecting a combination of directions. In this image that I have up on my screen, there's two sets of visible nozzles on either side of the circular sort of pod, and the little section has one outward, upward, downward, right, and I guess there would be one left. Basically every axis of a basic geometric axes. So there's two, but if Neil Armstrong was practicing, but he didn't practice on using the nozzles, I'm just wondering how that would be adequate practice using the giant floating machine locally. Like they showed it, but I was like, well, that's not practice for the same type of machine. It's like you're saying, can we practice on one machine that is completely different in its...
Right, the flying bedstead, they were practicing ascent. Or descent. They were practicing landing with the flying bedstead.
The way in which it operates,
and I believe they did have simulators for controlling the module, the part of the module they left in. See, what they did is the main craft was still in orbit, and it had a regular orbit. Maybe it was stationary. I'm not sure. But all they had to do was pop that thing up. So they didn't need those control nozzles to take off. They just needed them to control the thing once it got on the same level of orbit as the other craft. Then it could just maneuver itself and get itself into position and connect.
Maneuvering to practice for something that's not that. I just wonder, like, why? How?
I mean, has he never fucking watched any documentaries on this shit? Any videos? I mean, seriously, man. You're asking questions you should already fucking know, pal.
How is that adequate?
Well, it depends on one's opinion as what is adequate. I would say that you can only get as good as you can get here on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
There is no such thing as getting absolutely perfect training for something that was never done before. At that particular moment in time, man had never landed on the moon before. They didn't know how hard it would be. They could only do the best that they got. So they did some math and they said, okay, we believe that this geometry with this amount of thrust and this type of layout of this particular machine would be the best simulator in that type of situation.
Right.
And so we're going to go ahead and utilize this type of simulator, not because it's going to be a one-to-one direct example of what's actually going to happen, and utilize this type of simulator.
What's that? Analogous environmental conditions for training is beyond Jim Bobby's comprehension. Absolutely.
Not because it's going to be a one-to-one direct example of what's actually going to happen, but we're going to get you skilled enough so that when the real thing does happen, you're not going to immediately kill yourself.
Skilled in what, though? That's like saying, like, if I practice enough golf, I'll do fine in the football game. That to me.
No, what the fuck are you talking about, man? Do fine in the football game? No, you're training for golf. You know, you train for golf. You don't train for football when you're going to be a golfer, dipshit. Now, you might train on a putting green. That's not the same as a golf course. You might train on a driving range, right? That lets you know how straight or how far your ball can go, right? You fucking moron. Listen to this dumbass McNerfer.
To me, it's disanalogous. It's not like it's not even close to a one-to-one. The same criticism I have of like underwater training. I can see why visibly training underwater for a spacewalk.
Who's your friend?
Would look like a spacewalk, but I don't get that training people who are preparing for a really dangerous scenario where
soldiers don't train in combat. You know that, right? You know that no soldier goes into war to train. They train on the range. They train on the obstacle courses. They train on the night courses. So what are you talking about?
There's zero resistance.
And we're pretty goddamn successful, man.
In where they are. That means that even pushing off of a ledge slightly.
Big tech. I don't know.
If you hadn't practiced or known what that felt like, could send you into,
I debate flat earthers.
Massive velocity into the vacuum of space, but then you're practicing underwater. That's weird.
I would use a different example. I would say that it's similar to practicing on Top Golf, and that it can get you moderately better at real golf. Yes, they're two different sports, but they are similar enough, and that's what they were going for. They knew going into this, going into the Apollo program, that some.
Yeah, Red just said that NASA used some faith. Yeah. They had faith in their training, faith in the data, faith in the technology, faith in the science. That's a little different than what this dipshit believes in, which is just faith without any kind of credible evidence.
Some things were going to be novel, and there was absolutely nothing they could do to make it absolutely similar. So when astronauts train, like, for example, in the neutral buoyancy lab, which is that big giant pool, the reason why they're using the neutral buoyancy lab, the reason why they're using water is because that's literally the best they can do, because we haven't yet invented the technology to, at will, turn off gravity. We can't do that. And so we can only do the best that we can. And I would say that machine...
Jim Bob's chat has gone full science phobic. Yeah.
why they're using water, because that's literally the best they can do, because we haven't yet invented the technology to at will turn off gravity.
Symbolic veils abound in the Space Corp terminology. Jesus Christ. Symbolic veils.
We can't do that. And so we can only do the best that we can. And I would say that that machine was very much analogous to what they were going. Oh, absolutely.
Do you think? Yeah, I do.
Absolutely. The controls were exactly the same. The gimbaling geometry was exactly the same. And at the very end of the day, that type of geometry, that type of apparatus is what they would have had to use in order to get to the moon.
Except
it would be different if you said, hey, listen, in order to land on the moon, we're going to make you practice on this unicycle.
Wait, no. I think you're misinterpreting what I'm bringing up. We're not talking about. Okay, so yeah, you're saying getting away from the central command to get and land on the moon. You're saying this thing. I'm going to bring it up for my own audience here. This machine, you're saying, is an adequate training mechanism. That's what you're saying, right? It's adequate for preparing for the real thing. That's what you're saying, right?
It's as adequate as it could have possibly have been.
Right, but that like, let's say something's completely inadequate, you can still say it's the most adequate it could possibly be, right? It doesn't say it's adequate.
But that's the thing. As adequate as it can possibly be is the best that you can do. And also, people knew that no matter the training, no matter how good the training material that these astronauts got, they knew it was a risk. They knew it was a risk, and that there was a very real possibility that they were getting into something that they were completely unprepared for. But the reason why they chose these particular individuals to do this particular mission is because they have been placed in very sketchy situations before. They were trained pilots that flew experimental aircrafts. And so they wanted people that would be cool under that kind of pressure, and that's exactly who they got. So they found people with nerves of steel, courage, titanium balls, essentially.
American grit.
The best job they possibly could with what they had available to them.
Would you say grit?
Grit would be a good way of describing. I don't like the word grit. Just sounds like sandpaper. But yes, grit could be a nice thing, or a adequate thing.
Okay. Okay, but let's go to the water thing then too. Do you think training underwater, how does that prepare you for like a situation you can't fathom, where pushing off of something will send you into some sort of direction without being stopped, right? I'm wondering how it is you'll say water is a good preparation for the complete absence of matter and mass.
Well, I don't think it's trying to mimic that in particular. I think what they're doing in the neutral buoyancy laboratory is that they're practicing what they're going to have to do on the outside of the station. Each mission to the station has certain objectives that they have to complete.
You've never seen the moon. You should ask your parents to let you out of your Skinner box once in a while.
And they train for these particular objectives. The best way to train for these objectives is to actually do it a few times in a controlled environment, so that when the real thing happens, you're very much prepared.
Wow.
So they have simulators underwater, and they are positioned on these apparatuses in the exact same way that they would be up there in space. And so to mimic the actual experience, your orientation is shifting constantly. For example, that orientation shift and the way that you're going to be moving all of your tools.
See, he's not a good faith actor. He just isn't.
For example, that is best mimicked underwater at the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory. Now, to say that it's a perfect one-to-one would be a bit of a stretch, I would say, but it's the best that they got. And
I think I'll just push back on this. Don't you think that?
But the ISS is in that tank. That's where the ISS is in that swimming pool.
A harness, like being suspended in a harness, absent being able to go upward, like moving upward easily. A harness. Wouldn't that be a better example, like a harness up in the air than underwater?
In a few applications, it could be. I don't know.
Yeah. Someone asked me a question, if you don't mind. He says,
yes, they've trained with harnesses too.
How does the ball throwing analogy apply to geostationary satellites? The ball throwing analogy.
So, like, how does it? Okay.
Because in order to get geostationary, they have to go up on rockets, and the rocket has to put thrust out to get pushed up there. His viewers are as dumb as he is.
Okay, so if you have a ball and you throw it sideways, it's going to curve and hit the ground. So that's how you first get into orbit. That was just to describe what an orbit actually is. So a little bit of orbital mechanics here. The further you go away from the Earth, the less of a gravitational pull that you're going to have to deal with.
Oh, I thought he was talking about the throwing a ball at the ground. But I mean, they can't understand
with, which means the less velocity.
I mean, it's just sad. It really is.
You're going to need sideways in order to maintain that orbit. And so there is a certain.
I mean, it's sad that people wasted and squandered their fucking their education when they had the chance to get one.
Altitude where you are the perfect distance away, that
and free of charge too. I mean, the student doesn't pay for his education. Either parents pay for it or the state pays for it. But it's sad that they just fucking, I don't want that. I don't want that free shit.
That your orbital velocity will take you around your complete orbit at the same rate that the Earth rotates. And so from Earth's perspective, looking up at that satellite, it would appear to remain in the exact same part of the sky. That's how you get like Sirius XM satellite radio, for example. It's at that same part of the sky because it's at a certain altitude where its orbital velocity.
It doesn't matter. Jesus. I can't. I just can't.
And its orbital period is the same as the rotation period of the Earth.
Okay, another person asks similar question in a different scenario. The basketball marble example, he says, leaves out that our muscles acting as a force, and then the fact that you don't gain lift from pushing against them, you're just going to say, well, no, it's at some point you're going to say that you could release something from your body, so to speak. Then you're saying you would have lift. So is that essentially what it would be? Is that
yeah, if you've got something that's so heavy and so massive, and if you were able to move it, yes, it's resistance against inertia. If you pushed it down, you'd move up. If you were strong enough to do that.
Pushing up muscles previously to that guy, I said instead of using.
But again, is it hitting the ground?
Our muscles. If you remember what I said earlier, I said instead of using our muscles, we're using a chemical reaction to do the throwing. And I can tell you one thing: if I had the capability to throw a medicine ball at Mach 5 towards the ground, oh boy, my ass would be soaring into the sky. I'll tell you that much right now. But unfortunately, I'm not Superman. I don't have the capability of throwing a basketball or a medicine ball at Mach 5 towards the ground. But I know something that can throw mass at Mach 5 towards the ground: rockets, because they have a chemical reaction that's doing the work.
So, by that principle, is it possible to have really tiny chemical reactions that aren't so crazy and explosive to keep something like levitated, so to speak? I mean, this is more hypothetical.
I don't know of any such reactions. If you know of any, please inform me.
Well, no, I don't. I'm just wondering what the future engineering would be if it's the case that a mere chemical reaction, not a mere one, a big one, that's moving mass away from something, if that was somehow turned to a smaller thing than it with the same power.
You can levitate rockets. You would just decrease the size of the nozzle, or you would just use a smaller rocket engine essentially. And then that smaller rocket engine could be sized just so that the upward force matches the downward acceleration of gravity.
Gotcha. And then another thing that I thought of, was thinking just visually, like the LEM in the vacuum of space maneuvering. You said it's using one thing for a thruster, which produces its direction, and you said the other thrusters are more for orientation, which is attitude, correctly, like the way in which you're facing. Is that
the
correct?
way in which you're facing?
Okay, I guess the question is, like, from that view, then, are there more
Nowadays, they use gyroscopes for maneuvering.
thrusters required then? Because attitude, like for instance, you can be sent.
I mean, that would just be cool, wouldn't it? I mean, I want to picture you're on board the space station, on board the ISS, and then you go to the main control room, and it's like this handle that's attached to a big fucking gyroscope, and you just like, and the ISS spins and 90 degrees to where you pushed it. That would be fucking awesome.
Into a direction and facing the wrong way, and you could hit side thrusters to change the way in which you're facing, but not the direction. So are you saying that back to the LEM, that the like turning, for instance, like you're saying the side thrusters wouldn't be used for turning, but they're used for facing directions, right?
Well, turning and facing directions are synonymous in this context, and
they
also
are?
you can use.
Wait. Can we let's just stay on that for a second. If you're in space and you're sent in one sort of line of direction, you could be facing.
Wait, what did he say was different?
So are you saying that back to the LEM, that the like turning, for instance, like you're saying the side thrusters wouldn't be used for turning, but they're used for facing directions, right?
Well, turning and facing directions are synonymous in this context, and
they
also
are?
you can use.
Wait. Can we let's just stay on that for a second.
Yeah, if you're facing that direction and you want to face that direction, what do? You turn, right?
If you're in space and you're sent in one sort of line of direction, you could be facing a different way, right? Like facing forward and still going in the line of direction. And if you remove some mass from your pod, right, it could change the tilt of the machine, but not change the actual direction, right? But then you're saying there's some threshold at which the tilt is no longer the thing using the same thrusters, the tilt thrusters? That's kind of what I'm asking. To turn, are you using the same thrusters as to tilt? If turning isn't actually synonymous with tilting.
Okay. Well, we said that that pointing was synonymous with turning, not tilting. So tilting is a different word being used. But essentially, you can use those thrusters for two things: minor corrections. So, like, let's say if I'm hovering right next to the International Space Station and I want to bring it into docking, I would use those small maneuvering thrusters, the RCS. I can use those to orientate myself, to point myself in a particular direction.
Eeyore, this was August 28, 2024.
Or move myself in
So about 6 months ago.
relation to the International Space Station at really, really slow
Or 4 months ago, 5 months ago.
speeds. But I would use my main engine when I really need to get up to speed, i.e. lifting off from the moon and so on.
Speed, yeah, the speed. And what speed?
You would want the bigger engine to do the big work. You would use the smaller engines to do the smaller work. And the smaller work being done would be like turning yourself in a particular direction, or making so that you point in a particular direction, or doing very, very small, minute changes to your direction.
What velocity?
See, you don't even need little bitty small nozzles. Because a lot of rockets, when they go up, if something happens, they just hover for a while. And then everybody starts running away, and then they fucking crash. So, yeah, you can use a rocket to hover. You just don't use as much thrust as when you're going up.
Velocity, and what?
I mean, that's what they do with the chopsticks, right? It comes down and it hovers and then finds where it is and then drops in.
What speed would you think was necessary to lift off from the moon?
Maybe a mile a second.
A mile a second?
Maybe. I could be wrong there, but I think it is either less than a mile per second or about a mile per second. But
a mile per second.
Oh, I don't see any flame. Hydrazine doesn't put out a lot of flame. I think it's hydrazine, isn't it? What's the what was the propellant?
Second from the ground?
From the in relation to the surface of the moon.
Okay, so you're saying to take off from the moon, you'd want to reach a mile in 1 second from the surface of the moon, and that would have to increase.
Here, let me see. Escape velocity of the moon. 2.3 kilometers per second. So whatever that is in freedom units. Echo. How many miles an hour is 2.38 kilometers per second?
2.38 kilometers per second is about 5,324 miles per hour.
5,324 miles an hour. So it'd be about a mile a minute. Right? Or I don't know. It's a mile an hour. Yeah, a mile an hour.
Increase right in speed eventually to kind of meet up with the central command, correct?
Or wait, is that? I don't know.
You would launch at a particular point where you intersect the.
I'm too high to fucking think right now.
Command module at the very moment that you hit your orbital velocity.
Okay, so
that can easily be calculated.
Okay, that makes sense. But you're saying a mile from takeoff, you want to be starting pretty fast, about a mile per second, right?
No, from takeoff you're at 0. When you take off, then you would gradually increase relative to the surface of the moon to a mile per second.
Oh, okay, so eventually you get a mile per second. But the takeoff itself, you can do super.
If you go instantaneously to a mile per second, dude, the fuck? You know how fast? You know how many? Damn.
Super slow or relatively slow, or it doesn't matter?
Your acceleration is ultimately irrelevant. It's whether or not you can get to that particular velocity before your fuel runs out.
I mean, there isn't any air, but there is inertia.
Oh, right. So because you got to catch up and connect to the main
So long as you meet them at that particular point in space at the velocity necessary, your acceleration is ultimately irrelevant.
Okay.
So whether you want to accelerate at 2 Gs, 5 Gs, 10 Gs, dear God, it doesn't matter. So long as you can get to that particular point in space at the velocities necessary before your fuel runs out.
Gotcha, I understand.
Now, if I can kind of just shoehorn it back to the International Space Station, because we went on the side tangent for a bit.
Okay.
I wanted to bring up the evidence that I had one more time, and I just want you to tell me why it may not be enough, or even if it is enough.
Yeah.
So we basically spoke at length about orbital mechanics, velocity, how rockets work, the atmosphere, and what effect it actually has on spacecrafts and stuff like that. And I'm going to be confident.
See, he keeps flashing up memes on the fucking screen. What a dipshit.
At this point, saying that you know enough, that you know that the...
Look, here's my mental age. Here, look.
Why it may not be enough.
Here's my mental age.
Or even if it is enough.
Yeah.
So we basically spoke at length about orbital mechanics, velocity, how rockets work, the atmosphere, and what effect it actually has on spacecrafts and
Yeah. So he wasn't doing a good enough job of it, so he has to put up a meme for a smirk. Wow.
stuff like that. And I'm going to be confident at this point saying that you know enough that you know that the International Space Station
Yeah, he thought that was a gotcha.
cannot be an aircraft in the traditional sense. It's
See, he's the kind of person that repeats the last 3 or 4 words you say to sound like he knows what you're talking about. He pulls a Brian Griffin.
not. It's very unaerodynamic. It doesn't have the ability to produce its lift from a surrounding atmosphere. That the only way it can stay where it is to be in orbit. And yes, occasional reboosts necessary.
Hey, Stanley, what's up? I missed you.
But that is still the definition of a successful functioning satellite. Just because that's people in it, who cares? It's still a satellite. So if I was able to prove to you that it is going that fast, it is at that altitude, it is that particular shape, it even looks like a station.
Yeah.
Would that still not be enough for you to be confident in saying, yes, the International Space Station, one, is in space and therefore is a satellite?
I would say I would be confident enough saying that that's not an airplane or anything else I know as far as things that travel through air or anything above air. To my knowledge of what things do in the air, it doesn't fit the description, so I would grant that. As far as what it is and how it is, not necessarily. I wouldn't concede. I would maybe say, oh, well, that explanation, I don't see anything completely wrong with it necessarily, being the explanation.
So it is your position that of the explanations that are currently up for scrutiny, this one is the most acceptable.
Acceptable? Yeah, well, I'd say it's the most accepted.
See, we also know how big the ISS is. And you can use a telescope to look at it, to track it, and you can see how big it is in the viewfinder, in the oculus, in the eyepiece. And you can do calculations based on your focal length to see just how big it is and how far away it is, or how far away it is. So you can take its angular size and calculate the power of the telescope and do that calculation, and you can tell how far away it is.
The most accepted. Okay,
Yeah.
that's I guess what I meant to say. But
Well, I mean, acceptable.
Now for stars, can't do that, too far away. But for the ISS, yeah.
Accepted, we wouldn't make them synonymous, right? Because there are previous models or notions of things that were accepted, and you from your view, you wouldn't say they're just because they're accepted that they're acceptable. I would say they're accepted, that it's accepted. It's just that when it comes down to it, when you say something's moving through space and you explain how it's moving through space, that's a descriptive claim, and it can be consistent or inconsistent. So I would give you that your description of the ISS and its movement is consistent so far as I know. Is that fair?
Well, yeah, it is consistent, and I don't want to get bogged down into the terminology, but I did want to challenge you on one thing, and that was, it's like, yes, it doesn't match any other thing other than a satellite. So if we are at the point where this is like the best possible explanation for what we're seeing and measuring, observing, and what anyone can do, we can even calculate it using orbital mechanics, and it's right there, just as predicted. I must ask, what is still giving you pause on making that final step?
The final step of saying, yes, that's an ISS that was built traveling.
That is a satellite, essentially. So what was giving you that final pause and saying that that is indeed a satellite?
Well, because the thing that you're claiming it is, you're saying, well, everything about that thing reads satellite, but that brings me into question what a satellite is. So it would be circular to argue that way. So, I mean, I would say...
We already went over what
I would
the
say,
characteristics of a satellite are.
Yeah, I would say the thing that you're saying is moving very quickly in space matches your description of what a satellite is.
Yeah, so it would be safe to call it a satellite, but I want to know why.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Like if someone is dressed like a woman, I wouldn't just say that they're a woman because they're dressed like it.
Yeah, but if...
Yeah, he's one of those. He's one of those. The definition of satellite definition is an artificially placed body placed in orbit around the Earth or Moon or another planet in order to collect information or for communication. In astronomy, a celestial body orbiting the Earth or another planet. So, yeah, the ISS or satellites are artificial bodies placed in orbit around the Earth or Moon. So,
if I tear off their panties and there's a vagina there, what would we call it then?
Yeah, if I saw a vagina, I'd be like, that's a woman.
And I see.
If you saw a vagina, you wouldn't know what to fucking do with yourself. It's like, holy shit, I finally saw a vagina.
The orbital velocity up there, so what are we calling it?
An object moving in space.
So it's not a woman, it's just a person with a vagina.
Well, I mean, to say objects moving in space are all satellites, right? That's not a good reasoning. Like if you say there's something else that's moving exactly like a satellite does, but it's not a satellite, it doesn't follow.
It's not just an object in space. It's an object in space that is behaving in the exact way that satellites would behave in. And so if we looked at, for example, if we were to calculate where the International Space Station is going to be at a particular point in time, and we're making those calculations based off of orbital mechanics, and it matches perfectly, then we know that that particular craft is obeying orbital mechanics.
Yeah, I already granted that your claim of what something is consistent with your description of what it is and how it operates.
Okay,
I mean, that's all.
So being that we have this, really, really good consistency, for some reason that's still not good enough.
Well, because if you accept what the ISS is, right, there's a jump for me. That's why. If you're asking what's the leap here, that's gives you the reservation that you're hearing in my position is that, and this is probably a different stream altogether, is that the assumption of that being a thing that was built by men and it was built in the condition it's actually moving right now. I just don't have the evidence that happened.
You mean, so basically your major roadblock here is videos of its construction?
Yeah, like
But he'll believe in God that has absolutely no evidence, right? He believes in God, but he doesn't believe in something that man has done.
Documentation of its construction, and I looked into the construction, and again, it's another first-time thing, right? You got to get it exactly the first time, where several different engineering firms from several different nations work together, never having built this thing, and it was assembled first time, first shot, going 17,500 miles per hour, and I just don't see supportive evidence that's convincing to me as far as that was how that happened, I guess. But
are you under the assumption that this thing was built in space, or was it assembled in space?
The claim is that it's assembled. At that speed, right? At that moment.
So if we have images of the International Space Station literally changing shape as more modules are added, would that not satisfy that criteria?
What you're saying? You have images?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Remember my good friend Astronomy Live? He has a over 5-hour video documenting his own observations of the International Space Station. He's been doing this for a really long time.
What do you mean he directly observed it?
Directly, as in through his telescope, he was able to see the International Space Station through many phases of its.
Did he happen to see a spaceship drive up and drop off the new part?
The space shuttle was indeed docked to the station at that time, and when the space shuttle leaves, you then see new parts added, because it's actually the space shuttle.
I would look at that.
Brought all this stuff over to where the space station is, so that it could be assembled.
Yeah, you can send me that. I'd be interested in seeing that.
Epic. Okay, so let's continue the rest of this conversation on a hypothetical, because I know you haven't watched it yet, and I don't expect us to be able to watch 5 hours worth of content on this live stream. That's a bit absurd. But let's go ahead and assume that you did watch it, and you see images through Astronomy Live's telescope, his LX200, and you see literally the modules being added, the shape changing of the International Space Station, the shuttle being docked to and delivering the payload, and so on and so forth. You saw all of that. Would that then give you enough of a kick to make that leap to say, yes, this is a satellite?
Yeah, depending on how that footage is strung together and such, I would still use a skeptical lens to do it, but certainly it would push me in the direction. Yeah.
Well, it would be. I know how it's structured. It's structured according to their date, oldest to newest. It's following the line of progression as it actually happened.
So what you're saying is your friend, through his telescope, took photos and videos. Videos being
primarily videos,
but you have to basically stop it, right, to see the clarity of the image, right? So it's
not necessarily. Now now don't get me wrong. It's yes, you're looking through a telescope. It does jump around a little, but if you wanted to freeze frame it, that's totally. But
it's just blur. I mean, I've seen videos. It's just I'm saying it's so fast that it's a blur little thing where you can't make out like hard lines and shapes, right? From a video, you have to stop it at some point, right?
You can freeze frame it if you want, but Astronomy Live is very good at this sort of thing. What I'm going to do for my audience, and you can share with your audience if you so choose, I'm going to screen share something for you.
Sure.
All right, here we go. Screen sharing now. This is one such image from Astronomy Live that I tweeted out recently. I did this to push it onto
hold on a second. I got to bring your visual back up just for a second. Sorry.
He'd eat the covers. That's all he'd do, Stanley. He'd eat the covers and use the pages for toilet paper.
Where are you?
Where the fuck?
Sorry, my OBS is stacked with so much stuff here. Is it Discord meeting? Okay, here we go. Okay. All right, I think, let me see. Where is it? Where are you? Something's in the way. What's in the way? Discord's in the way. Okay, there you go. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Okay, so what you're seeing here is the International Space Station through his telescope, and so you can make out each individual solar panel. You can make out the SpaceX Dragon that's on the front of the thing. This is what you can expect to see from Astronomy Live, because Astronomy Live does great work with his telescope. Absolutely fantastic work. This is what we're seeing. This is the kind of thing that we were able to capture, but we were able to capture this same object as it progressed through its assembly. So the modules were assembled down here on Earth. They were then loaded into the payload bay of the NASA space shuttle. The space shuttle went up to meet the International Space Station in orbit, and then that's where the pieces were then assembled, kind of like Legos.
How much smaller is the shuttle that's carrying the payload in comparison to what the image we're looking at here is?
I don't understand the question.
What's the relative size of the ship that's meeting up with this thing and docking to it? What's the relative size to it?
Let's find out. Actually, we can do this quite easily. So let me type this in.
Because if it was even if it was like 1/4 the size, based on that image, if he got that much clarity, what would be convincing to me is a step-by-step, because the docking you would assume takes it's not immediate, right? So the process, correct me if I'm wrong, would be that a space shuttle would make its way and meet the same movement conditions and alignment as the space station, right? And eventually lock itself onto it. Well,
there you go. This image should give you a sense of scale.
Yeah, no, that's big enough to basically obtain the thing that I would want to see, which is that space shuttle right there getting closer and closer, being tracked closer and closer and closer to the ISS and attaching itself.
Being docked is as close as you can get, and we have.
Well, no, hold on. I have a question though. My question is, if the space shuttle itself has to very gradually get close to the thing, that would assume that there's two noticeable objects through a telescope that have to be moving at the same relative speed, such that the tracking of one includes the other. And before it's docked and it's just kind of sitting there waiting to orient itself in connection, you're saying the best we can get is post connection. Well, I'm asking, if it took a certain amount of time where they shared the same orbital movement but they weren't attached, and then they were, it seems like something reasonable that you could document.
There is stuff that I don't know if Astronomy Live himself documented it, but it has actually been documented where the space shuttle was approaching the International Space Station, but they were two separate objects.
Yeah, that seems. I mean, based on that size, I mean that's not half, but maybe a third, absent the solar panels.
I think that the individual modules could fit within the payload bay. Once you assemble it all together, the whole thing as an assembly is going to be bigger than the space shuttle.
Is this a photo you're showing?
Yes.
Who took that?
Soyuz.
Oh, something next to it?
Yes, the Russians.
Is it as same size or slightly smaller?
No, absolutely not. You see that thing? Hang on. Okay,
yeah, that little nub. Yeah,
the little nub, to the, not quite center, but more to the right.
Yeah, I see it.
That's the Soyuz. That's the Russians.
Wait, no, who took the photo? If that's the Soyuz, I'm asking who's at the vantage point.
The Soyuz. There's more than one.
There's a series of nubs.
Yeah, because the international is actually, well, technically international, but it's actually more of a partnership between the Russians and the United States. And so when you have multiple spacecrafts coming in, there is a rotation, and as the rotation is happening, you take photos.
Can you if the Soyuz is right there at that vantage point, why can't they just get the video I need, like step by step right there, like right from that angle?
Get the video what you mean from
the angle
spacecrafts docking at the exact same time?
Well, yeah, you're saying that Soyuz is taking that.
Have two crafts docking at the exact same time.
No. Whoever took the photo, I'm saying that view right there is perfect. I'm asking, why isn't that just a full video where you see, like within an hour of video or 2 hours of video, the space shuttle approaching the ISS, maneuvering itself to it looks like it was facing outward and upward relative to the ISS, and attaching
video. They have it from the perspective of the space shuttle. They also have it from the perspective of the ISS. Which one would you prefer?
The Suez one.
Hang tight on that one. I will bring it up right now. Bear with me for a quick second.
Because that angle right there, it's like, if you're not going to use some sort of telescope to try to do it, which would verify it, like if they were both happening at the same time, like someone tracked those things pre-docking and post-docking, and then something more closer and local to the ISS was tracking.
Exactly, RT. Why did NASA spend billions of dollars to get the photos I want? Exactly.
The same exact thing?
All right, hang on a second. I got to down the quality of this because I'm taxing out my internet here. So the quality might be potato here, but let's see if I can get this up. Bear with me for a quick moment. Boom. All right, so here's the Soyuz one I've muted the audio because it's cancer, but this is a time lapse, so you can kind of see. Let me increase the, let me move forward a bit here.
What is that flapping thing?
That's a communication disc. Oh, that's spinning actually.
Spinning.
Yeah, it's spinning, so it's a communication disc. This arm is going to retract out of the way. See, now what it's doing is it's coming into its docking point. And you remember that spot that we highlighted in the image?
The nub?
Yeah, the little nub thing. So it's going to turn into that nub momentarily. So you can kind of see as it goes in. Eventually, the space station at this particular point will go into Earth's shadow and it'll become dark. But what they do is that they spotlight the docking port so that the astronauts on board can guide it into where it needs to go. For the sake of time, I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Fast forward a little bit. Fast forward a little bit. You can kind of see the docking port right now, right there. And then it will dock right there. And then there's latching mechanisms that grab on and latch it into place.
Is it normal for footage in space to look identical to water?
It doesn't look like water to me.
It looks like underwater for me, but thanks for showing that. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Well, yeah, I would look at more stuff. I'll go follow Astronomy Live for his things. You know,
Okay,
just to make sure I'm exposed to what you guys are appealing to.
Cool. Then I think what we should do is this. What we should do is that after you take a look at this 5-hour video.
So you got about half an hour left.
And you know, Godspeed if you decide to watch every single second of that, because it is a lot of work to get through it. But what you would see at that point is the entire documentation of the manufacturing, the building, and the assembly of space station in that video.
What was that
After
link?
that is done, we will regroup and have another conversation.
Yeah, that sounds like a possibility. Can you send me or just name that one docking video? I don't know if it's some crazy link or something.
Just type in Soyuz docking, or you can type in like Russian, because the Soyuz is a Russian spacecraft. It's not American.
Gotcha.
So that should so if you look up a Russian space station docking, you'll find it on YouTube.
Okay, I'll look at that.
Cool. All right then. So what we'll do is oh yeah, in the filmed one, let me bring this up real quick.
Yep, he does.
Because I want to make sure that my audience, Astronomy Live, bear with me for a quick moment here. I want to make sure I get the proper link. So this video was posted. Okay, so it's 5 hours and 16 minutes. Holy shit. That's
you could
dedication.
you could put it on like triple, right? Or what's the highest?
But it's still 5 hours, even at triple speed. We're going to be here for a while. What I did was I posted the link in my live chat. You want to grab it from there. I'll also be sending it to you directly via Twitter.
That works. Yeah.
So you should have it in 3, 2, 1. So there it is. It's titled Construction of the International Space Station. And for your audience, you want to look for that on a channel called Astronomy Live. Repeat that. It is Astronomy Live. Name of the video, Construction of the International Space Station.
And then what's your channel?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's like, well, is his comment about, well, it looks like it's underwater. That's his little flash.
Name for my audience?
It's Red's Rhetoric.
That's REDS.
Again, like I said, he's not a good faith actor. He did not go into this conversation in good faith.
Rhetoric.
Yes, RHETORIC.
Cool.
And there you'll be able to. I do videos with Astronomy Live too. There you can also find the video where I measured the altitude, size, and speed of the International Space Station. We use the moon as a backdrop. For people that have problems with that methodology, as flat earthers do, then you would want to look at Astronomy Live's video where he did the exact same observation, but without using the moon.
Yeah.
Which nullified that argument against it for whatever reason they made it. But yes, so what we're going to go ahead and do, we will end this here. So I'm going to disconnect the call, invite some other people in to have further discussion. You're free to come back later if you want, but we'll just check back later and schedule another conversation.
Okay, cool, man. I appreciate the conversation and all the exchange and the info.
All right, sounds like a plan. I will be talking to you in DMs.
Okay, cool. You send me that link in Twitter, you said, right?
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Thanks.
All right, bye-bye.
See ya. There we go. All right.
So let's see if you learned anything.
Wait, where is he? Where am I at? What's happening here? There we go. Take that down. Discord. Look at Clay freaking out. Dude, acting the way you're acting is why people.
So, wait, hold on a second. Wait, where's Poison Ivy? No. There we go. So this is these are December's files for resin printing. If I can make it a little. So this is one of them. Poison Ivy. Very detailed. You can't, it doesn't do it justice. Also, Null. I believe he's from the, I believe he's a symbiote hunter in the Venom universe, or the Venom canon. And then Optimus Prime. I believe it's just, yeah, STLN bust. So you get both a full Optimus Prime and a bust. Looks like he's embedded in a rock, which is fucking cool as shit. But yeah, Null is pretty good. It comes with like 3 different heads. You can change the heads on it. And then Poison Ivy just looks great. So I got a bunch. I have a bunch of files. I've got those three: Colossus, Deadpool, Doomsday, Invincible, Kratos, Lobo. Nothing in there. I don't know why that's there. Omega. Yeah, Omega's like a cartoon character I've never heard of. Omni-Man, Predator, Punisher, Rat Fink, and Superman. With a choice between comic book head or Harry Cavill's head. So you get a choice. Plus I have like a whole bunch of dragons, file sprint dragons, like really nice dragons, Chinese dragons, fantasy dragons. So I've collected a library, and as soon as the printer gets here, I want to start printing these things as big as I can get them, like quarter scale. I mean, I can print quarter scale on my thing. I had to I with the other printer I was limited to like 1/8 scale, which is like this big. I'll be able to print 2-foot tall characters, like models that are 2 foot tall when you put them all together.
People are like, well, Clay's acting weird. I think it looked like water, dude. I thought it looked like water. Notice how every piece of evidence you can just claim is fake? I didn't claim every piece of evidence is fake, you liar. Why are you such a liar? Think about how emotional you are right now, Clay.
Your face gave you away, dipshit. I'd love to play poker with this jackass. I really would.
You're so emotional, dude.
He just got a whole barnload of tells.
You're such a spurgy little woman. You act like a flat earther. No, I don't actually. I don't act like a flat earther. That's a meaningless
Yeah, you do. Holy shit, yes you do.
Statement. You don't have any reason.
Yeah, who said who was saying it earlier? He pretends not to be a flat earther.
You're not a grown adult man because you don't know what reason is. You can't control your emotions. You're freaking out, right? You're just freaking out, bro. Everyone's laughing at you. You're a joke. Okay?
Oh, sorry. Here we go.
How about that? You ever think about that? All right. I think I turned off like some.
Yeah, I'm rubber and you're glue. I know you are, but what am I? You're a big doo-doo head.
One of my things. Google Meet, Discord down. There we go. You have a dogmatic emotional reaction to this, Clay. You're not a man. You're the least attractive thing to a woman right now.
Dogmatic reaction. You should see his fucking cartoons. They are as dogmatic as you can fucking get, man. He doesn't like gay people. He doesn't like trans people. He doesn't like smart people. He doesn't like government people. Yeah.
Like, who cares? I think it looked like water, dude. That's just what it looked like to me. Do I have any other reference? Do I have a reference to what it looks like in space other than what they show me? No. So it's not huge.
No, but you're giving a typical flat earther response to that. All flat earthers think all that shit's done in a big pool, big tank filled with water. So
huge. It's not a huge deal for someone to reference the only thing they can reference, and the only thing I can reference that's similar is water. Now, Clay, from your view, wouldn't it?
Why would you reference water when they're in fucking space, man? Why would you reference water when they're in space, where there is no water?
Follow that.
See, he's trying to be clever, right? He can't be clever.
It looks like water if they train in water to mimic the movement, to mimic what it would be like. So it's
they don't train the spacecraft in water, stupid. They train the astronauts in water.
not even inconsistent to say it looks like water. Claytard.
Yes, it is inconsistent.
Now stop bitching and moaning, dude. No one likes a bitching and moaning male.
Stop whining.
I thought it looked like vodka. I just thought it looked... the reason I say water is because water has a very particular murkiness to it. And the absence of all matter, mass, distortion of light...
water has a particular murkiness about it. I guess if it was in space, it'd be pretty fucking murky, right? Because that would mean all of space would be water.
The absence of that in a vacuum would be clarity, and so it just doesn't look clear. There is something specific about water.
Okay, take a picture with a 1996 cell phone. Do that. Tell me how murky the air looks.
Underwater. That has...
See, the cameras they're using aren't the highest, man. The one you have on your phone is a higher resolution than what you looked at there.
Has a look to it. It looks like light is trying to get to it but can't fully. That's what I would call murkiness. Is that when something looks murky and it looks like light is trying to get to it. That's what I'm saying. I'll look at it again. Everyone
looks like light is trying to get to it.
Everyone has different perceptions, Clay.
I guess that'd be a way to describe it.
Our perception is that you're a little bitch.
Just fucking memes, man. Holy shit.
Let's take a look at it. I'll try to find the video here. Yeah. I mean, let me try to find it with the one he was at.
See, this is some of his artwork from his book.
Is this the one? Yeah, this is the one. It's not a big deal, dude. It's not like a huge deal, bro. Little bitch boy. Let me see. Where's YouTube? All right. Yeah, here we go. Let's look at it. I'm going to tell you why when it gets to that closer section, it looks different to me. Space looks like water to me. I just don't know what else to refer to a big tech. I don't know what else to, because there's no...
You could start by not calling it water. That'd be a good place to start.
For instance, I use the same thing against people who are definite that the moon landing is fake. I hold the position that was fake. But if you say it looks so fake, you'd have to know what it looks like when it's real. But that goes against your argument because then you need the moon landing to be real in order to reference it as something that looks real. The same with space. So it's a problem.
See, I'm trying to do logic.
It's just a problem of you don't have any background knowledge. And to me, I don't know what else it could look like. I mean, it looks like, looks like space milk. That's all. I don't even know why it matters so much. That's what's crazy to me is you get people like...
Yeah. Why are you obsessing over it?
Clay. It's just funny. No, you're not acting like it's funny. You're acting like you're defending like a strong belief that's identical to your identity. That's what you're acting like. I'm just looking at does that look like anything? I don't know. I don't.
And nobody is as intellectual as he is.
Understand the problem. I don't even understand the problem even from Red's position of getting people to accept the ISS as what it's said to be anyway. See, this is the switchover. This is why I say it looks like water. This looks like water. That looks like underwater to me.
No, that looks like a very bright light shot through space hitting a reflective spacecraft with low resolution, and that's what you get.
That's what it looks like. To me, that looks like deep water. That's just what it looks like. So you can say, well, deep space looks like deep water. That's why it looks like water. But you can't say it doesn't look like water. You can't say it doesn't look like water. You can say...
Okay, if you want to think it looks like water, you can think it looks like water. You have that right.
Hey, deep space looks like water. Clay is acting like we called his dad gay. That's funny. It's the lighting. Yeah, it could be the lighting. I'm fine with that. If you say it's the lighting, but to say it doesn't look like water... I mean, look at this chick. Fact.
Man, the wiring guy really knocked himself out on this one, didn't he? the harness connector.
Space is like water. Yeah, well, there's nothing else to reference but water. I just think it's not just the lighting. It's it has this weird film to it. I can't explain it. It has a film. Why is it always dark? I don't understand the lighting. I'm honestly gnostic. Some of the astronauts said they see stars. Some don't.
Why is it dark up there? Because you don't have the atmosphere to reflect and diffract the ambient light from the sun. The only reason it looks light outside in the daytime is because we have an atmosphere. Light comes through, there's particulate in the air. It bounces off that, and we see the light. You can't see light unless it's reflecting off something.
Some say there's no light. Some say there is light. I don't know. Viscosity.
I mean, you can see light straight on, but if that light is turned this way, you will not see it unless it reflects off something and you can see the beam. A laser, in a room, yes, you have particulate in the room, but if you take a laser in a vacuum, you will not see that beam until it hits a wall, hits an object.
That's the word. Thank you. Is this a hill you die on? There's no dying hill. What are you talking about? Why are you assuming I'm dying on a hill? It's irrelevant to my life. It's your hill. Clay, you're the one in the chat spurging. I'm not spurging. I don't care. I don't care if the ISS is real or not. I don't care.
Spurging. Is that a word, spurging?
Give a shit. You care. You care, Clay. Why? Well, because
that just looks rude. that thing they made just looks rude. It's like space porn.
Because you replace God with materialism. That's
how they do a facial in space. You just set it free and the girl just runs into it.
That's why. You replaced it. I'm not. This has no weight on me. It's just an inquiry, dude. You're a freak. You're an absolute freak show.
Yeah, it wasn't an inquiry, dude. You were scoffing the whole time, giving little fucking oh yeah, he's so smart kind of faces the whole fucking time, man. He's so intellectually dishonest. Like he went in there honestly. Spurkismoing?
Essentially. Now, someone could...
Oh, spurkismoing, yeah.
Could argue that if someone's cosmology informs or is intertwined with their theology, you could argue that it can affect something, right? For instance, NASA doesn't just explain space stuff. It makes statements of value. For instance, every time someone calls in from NASA, they make sure to say there's no borders in space. They make sure to posit some sort of platitude that tries to unite all humanity together. It adds in its activism. NASA...
And what's wrong with that?
Is not absent of activism. Okay.
I mean, it makes me laugh that humans go to war with humans. that just cracks me up.
Okay, that's a fact. That's a fact. I can prove.
We have to protect the animals, right? But we can go to war with each other. That's just fucking amazing.
Prove it to you. This has nothing to do with space right now. Ready? Nothing to do with space. Where's the most recent ad, which is hilarious? This is where you go, okay, there's more than just describing space and things like that. There's all sorts of...
Right. NASA's inclusive. They are inclusive. Because, believe it or not, whether you want to admit it, trans and gay people have minds. And they're productive people. They can do jobs. See? And when you discriminate against someone, when you show bigotry towards a group, that's your problem. That's a small mind.
Movements forward, right?
What does that have to do with space? Because there are LGBTQ in NASA, in the space program. Yeah.
What does this have to do with space?
My name is Larry Leo, a project manager at NASA Glenn Research Center. I manage science projects, especially Earth science projects. Right now, we use our sensors on the aircraft to monitor the harmful algae bloom in Lake Erie. We hope to study how to use our sensor and how...
NASA LGBT Pride Month profile. Okay.
See, that's what it has to do with it, because he's LGBTQ. I'm not sure which letter he is, but normally in videos like this, the person that is doing the thing, he's of that orientation.
NASA LGBT Pride Month profiler. Hey, Larry, what does your job as an engineer or technician at NASA have to do with your love of men's buttholes?
See that? And channels like this don't get shut down. They just don't. I'm not even gonna fucking address that. See, it's what month did that come out? During Pride Month? Because there's people that work for NASA and they're proud of who they are. As both gay, lesbian, transsexual, whatever, bi, and they're also proud of being in NASA. You really are a fucking closed-minded fuck, aren't you?
Tell me, make the connection for me.
I am gay. I am my authentic self.
Excuse me? Excuse me?
I am a queer woman.
I am a transgender woman.
Well,
I am a lesbian.
I am gay and I'm my authentic self.
I'm a pedophile.
It just pisses him off, man. It just pisses him off. People that aren't religious and aren't like him. And wasn't he talking about getting emotional and shit earlier? Wasn't he talking about that?
Oh. I like children?
I'm a parent.
What? Did he say he likes children? Did he say he likes children? Or do you just assume that because you're a closed-minded fucking dipshit? Is that what you did?
Authentic self.
I'm a pedophile. I like...
No, he didn't say he's a pedophile.
I am a lesbian.
I am gay and I'm my authentic self.
I'm a pedophile.
Yeah, no, he didn't say he's a pedophile. You have trouble listening, don't you?
I like children.
I'm a parent of a transgender son and I'm very proud.
What?
Look at him. He can't fucking keep his emotions. Right? So it's okay to be emotional about the shit you hate, right? Right? But you'll mock other people for being emotional?
The fuck? The fuck is this?
That shit you hate because you're a closed-minded fuck. See, it's called projection, man. It's called projection. Psychological projection. Psychological projection is a defense mechanism where a person attributes their own thoughts, feelings, or behaviors onto someone else. It's a way for people to avoid acknowledging or dealing with their own emotions and instead believing that others have those same qualities. Here are some examples of projection. Someone who's angry at a friend that might project that anger onto the friend and say that the friend is the one who is angry. A father who has not had a successful career might project his insecurities onto his son, tell him that he won't amount to anything. So if let's see. Psychological homophobic projection is a defense mechanism some people use to cope with their own attraction to people of the same sex. This defense mechanism can lead to internalized homophobia, which causes people to feel self-hatred and self-disgust. See, what happens is you're raised in an environment of hate and ignorance. Hate towards gay people, hate toward the homosexual community. You're taught that. We aren't born with that. We're not born with hate. Okay? Hate is taught. And you were taught to feel a certain way about a certain group of individuals. And then you start feeling those urges. You know, those urges you're getting right now. And you can't hate yourself. So you project that hate onto other people, onto that group. See, that's called projection. And you're using a fucking bullhorn, pal.
The fuck? What is this? You think me believing in ISIS is my replacement for God? No, I never said that. You're so worked up, you can't even listen to what's being said. That's how worked up you are, dude. You're like a woman. You're like a woman who got wronged at a restaurant. You're like a woman who thought she was sitting over there in the restaurant, and the host is like, sorry, ma'am, you're actually over here. That's how you're acting right now. You need to be slapped in the face. You need to be actually slapped right in your face. Okay? Just settle down, dude. Just watch your commercial. Are you in this, Clay? There's Clay. There's Clay.
I knew I wanted to be in science ever since I was a little kid. I thought that it was really important to be my most...
By the way, this girl, Mallory Carbon, she was on a TV show where she was brought on as the robotics engineer, and she failed. She got kicked out of the show because her first performance, she didn't know what the hell she was doing.
Authentic self, especially knowing that this was my
Guys.
Cool it with the anti-Semitic remarks.
Stop it. I know what you're all thinking.
dream. Queer people can dream big. Exploration needs to be for everybody. Every person.
You guys understand it? Exploration is the pseudonym for sexual liberation. Exploration means...
No, it's not. You paranoid fuck. No, space exploration is exploring space. Has nothing to do with their sexuality, pal. Why did you go that way?
Do whatever you want. Now, do as thou wilt. Interestingly enough, do as thou wilt being their central theme, platitude. The beginning of NASA.
Do we need to see any more of this? You guys seen enough? I've seen enough. Yeah, I've seen enough. So, yeah, he's just filth. Pure fucking filth. Evil fucking filth. He said things like, you can't have purpose without, wait, was it? What was it? Oh yeah, here. You don't understand Newton's third law of motion. This is what I commented on this video. I learned that in 8th grade. What happened to you? His response is, that isn't an argument, nor did you correct anything I said. Don't be lazy. No, the post wasn't to correct you. The post was to maybe possibly have you research Newton's third law of motion. But that wasn't the comment I wanted to look at. Oh yeah. He says you can't have function without purpose. You can't have purpose without function. Hey, Twitch. And you can. You can build something that has a purpose, but it doesn't function. And you can build something that functions for a specific purpose, but you can use that for another thing. Not for the specific function that, or not for the specific purpose that it was designed for. He's just a pseudo-intellectual that thinks he's hot shit since he took a fucking quarter of fucking Philosophy 101. And he's a religious fucking fruitcake, so that doesn't help much. I'm done. I've been on for 3 hours, so I'm finished for the night. I don't feel like doing an 8-hour stream again, or 7-hour stream. And it's almost 9 o'clock, and I've still got some housework to do. I'm getting ready for my yearly inspection, or bi-yearly inspection, I'm not sure. So, yeah, I got stuff to do. I have to adult now. So, thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for coming by. Click like, subscribe, click the bell notification, share the show.